join us, I guess, in a few minutes. And then the mayor is running late. I'm not sure how late, but we got another meeting, I believe. So I will call this meeting to order. Mr. Wilcox, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Certainly. I pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Wilcox. Before we start, today is the last full board meeting of 2022. We made it through another calendar year. And so I'd just like to take a moment to thank all of the board members, Dr. Tracy and all of her staff, as well as the community, and wish you all many blessings during the holiday season and a happy new year. Thank you. And again, I think the agenda could be one that we should be able to move through fairly quickly. So again, just please be succinct with your committee reports and the discussion as much as possible. All right, and with that, our first item would be public participation. Dr. Joyner and Dr. White.
I'm ready.
Our first speaker is Jenny Graves. Jenny Graves, you may speak.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening. My name is Jennifer Graves. I've been a teacher in New Haven for 13 years, and I'm the Vice President of Special Services for the New Haven Federation of Teachers. During the last Board of Ed meeting, data was shared about our current vacancies throughout the district. There were 114 teacher vacancies, but of that, 88 were classroom-facing teachers. What I did not hear in that report was any information or emphasis on our special education and related service vacancies. New Haven is still in need of many school psychologists, speech pathologists, social workers, and over 25 special education teachers. These professionals are crucial in servicing our growing population of students who need the most instructional support and intervention. As a result of these vacancies, we are seeing extremely high caseloads and rosters, making it difficult to meet individual service hours, individual intervention needs, and assessment deadlines. Although the challenges my colleagues are facing with the new special education platform, Connecticut SEDS, are not solely a New Haven issue, it is becoming more difficult to stay legally compliant because of the number of students we are servicing. As many of my colleagues, I love New Haven, and I would like to retire from New Haven Public Schools. Mr. Goldson, you have inquired why teachers are leaving aside from salary. The one thing that would drive me from New Haven would be if I began to feel ineffective at my job. Even with ESSER grant funding, our special education and related service staff continues to do more with less, and we are stretched to our absolute limits. I've pleaded with this board and with district officials before, and I will continue as long as necessary to retain and recruit special education and related service professionals. We need caseload caps and appropriate adult to student ratios to ensure our students are properly supported and our staff can do their jobs effectively. While public education has never been perfect, we do need a change in structure and systems. We do need more funding. We do need a new vision. Please do not misinterpret our advocacy for complaints, for we care deeply for our students and we want New Haven to be a place where teachers feel safe, supported, and successful. In saying that, New Haven Federation of Teachers is asking this board to invite us to the search committee for the new superintendent, for we are ready and willing to do this important work with you and to collectively build a better tomorrow for New Haven Public Schools. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Leslie Blateau.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Leslie Blateau, and I'm a New Haven teacher, resident, and parent. New Haven Public Schools, and I'm the parent of the New Haven Federation of Teachers. In this time of transition in New Haven, as we work together to support our public schools, I invite the board to think about what it means to engage our community in this support, in oversight and in control of our schools. What does it mean for our community to have more say in how our schools are operated so we can meet the needs of the wide range of students who show up to learn every day? How can we commit to the Comer School Development Program best practices at the community level? Collaboration, no-fault problem solving, consensus building, and relationships are not just recommended for schools and classrooms. These are concrete strategies we can and should employ at the board and city level to reconnect with NHPS stakeholders, rebuild public trust, and rebuild community engagement with our system. One way we can do this is by ensuring that community members who represent our students and families, and that educators and professionals who work most closely with our students and families have a seat at the table and are included in the search committee for our next superintendent. When many NHFT educators and NHPS community members showed up at the Board of Alders hearing 2 weeks ago, there was a sense of frustration and confusion that community, teachers, and paras might not be on the search committee. One way to address that frustration and confusion is to ensure that we're included. As Jenny said, we're interested in and committed to this work. Another way we can ensure that our community continues to be involved with this work is to come together in person, listen to each other's stories, and envision a future where our schools are fully funded, fully staffed, and our students' wide range of needs are met. This is something that I know current district leaders are committed to, and it's something that our union wants to continue with as we build this coalition and continue organizing. So with that goal in mind, NHFT, AFSCME Council 4, Recovery for All Connecticut, and State Representative Robin Porter are hosting an Education Justice Town Hall this Saturday, December 17th at Celentano School. We will serve pizza at 12:30, and we will engage in conversation with our community from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. Please join us and continue this coalition work with us so we can ensure our students have the schools that they deserve. You can find more information on our website, nhft933.org, and I look forward to joining with you in community this Saturday. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I've been at the meeting. I was not as a panelist, though. I'm your Spanish interpreter.
Yes, I just received a call from your agency. We will put you into the slot right now. And Madam President, if you would like to let the audience know that it is available.
Buenas noches. Si desean escuchar esta reunión en español, favor de
Thank you.
presionar el enlace en la parte baja de la pantalla que dice interpretation o interpretación. Gracias.
And our next speaker is Ashley Stockton.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thanks. Good evening. This evening, I just wanted to raise the issue of the format of the Board of Education meetings. The next meeting will be held in the new year, and I sincerely hope that when we come back in 2023, that the Board of Ed meetings will be in person. There's absolutely no reason why they can't be hybrid at this point. We see so many of our city meetings being held in a hybrid model, and those meetings give the community a chance to gather in person. There's more to these meetings than just listening to them and seeing the panelists. The public is not privy to who is attending these meetings. We don't know how many people are attending these meetings. We don't know who's in the room with various panelists. It's really a lack of transparency and infringes on the democratic process. I just also want to underscore that in 2019, Mayor Elicker at that time was not the mayor. He was running for mayor, and he held an open meeting with New Haven teachers to hear their concerns and to sort of have a discussion about what education would look like in New Haven if he were elected mayor. And on that evening, what he said, and this is a quote, if he was elected mayor, he said he would encourage meaningful parent involvement with the school board so that parents don't have to rely on Facebook Live videos posted by education activists in order to know what is being said and decided upon at Board of Ed meetings, end quote. And yet here we are, he's been mayor for 3 years now, and this is exactly what we have to do. We have to rely on YouTube videos posted by the Board of Ed in order to know what is being said and decided upon at Board of Ed meetings. It's confusing, right? This is what the mayor said he believes in, that parents should have access to Board of Ed meetings. Yet we heard the president of this board, Ms. Rivera, say that she has the right as president of the board to decide what format the meetings will be held in, and she has decided to keep them solely remote. The reason she gave is for community participation. And here's the thing, we don't know how many people are participating. I've been attending Board of Ed meetings in New Haven for 16 years, and I've seen awesome participation. I've seen rooms like standing room only. And there's no reason why, if this format gives rise to community engagement, why we can't do both, right? If this helps people log on, if this helps people publicly participate, that's awesome. So keep this and add in person. We should be in a hybrid model, giving transparency, especially as we embark on a superintendent search. Again, right now, the Board of Ed members are the only people on the search committee, yet we don't know who is sitting in rooms with you. We don't know who you're talking to during these meetings. Thank you, Dr. Joyner. So please, when we come back 2023, let's resume in person. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Hyclus Williams.
Good evening, everyone. Hope everybody's doing well. Put a smile on your face. Have a nice evening. I didn't have anything to say really today, but after listening to the three people ahead of me, I want to ditto what they said. And I especially want to underscore the special ed shortage, because I know I have a colleague of mine who is subbing in a special ed classroom. And this week she sent out a message because there was an overwhelming amount of new students coming in, and it's just her and another para and a part-timer. And it was just not feasible for them to manage some of these new students that were coming in. They're not trained as special ed teachers, but they're helping out. So it is a serious situation that definitely needs to be addressed. I know there's a shortage, but maybe we have to hold off on students who we cannot taking at this point. We can't just keep taking students and we don't have the staff to teach them. It's not going to be beneficial to anyone concerned. So I think that's something that needs an immediate attention. And I also wanted to underscore again the point of being the paras and the teachers and parents, all the stakeholders to be involved with the superintendent search. I think that's very vital that everyone concerned be a part of this very important process. We don't want to repeat some of the mistakes we made in the past. So I think when the stakeholders are on board, the outcome should be better. Also with the Board of Ed meeting, I do agree that it's about time we do the hybrid meeting, because at least last time I spoke, a few of my colleagues were there with me, but due to technical difficulties, they didn't get a chance to make their statements. So sometimes people have those difficulties, those challenges with the technology in order to participate. So if we were in person, we would all be there, and then you could see us, and then you could talk with us. Nobody's seeing me right now except maybe the panel. but we get to connect with each other when we meet in person. And I know although we still have COVID out there, people are still meeting in person. We could maintain our distances or whatever we have to do, but I think we should look into addressing that. Thank you, guys. Have a great night and a great weekend.
Mr. Goldson, are you speaking for public comment?
Yes, if everybody else is done.
It's your turn.
Right, thank you. Just a few points that I want to put on the record again. It's embarrassing that I have to raise these issues every board meeting, like the 5th meeting now. Not just as a board member, but as a longtime member of this community. When I request simple information, I should be able to get it. Not only am I not getting the information, but I'm not even getting a response back saying that I'm not going to get the information. So it's, again, I requested score sheets related to the cleaning contract. Still haven't received those, nor any response from this administration as to whether those are forthcoming or not. I have not received the FOI emails that I requested between board members and the communications director directly related to the silencing of me. I asked for a briefing regarding the student transfers at Brennan Rogers, which is in my district. Even though it's in all of our districts, it's in the city. People in that district voted for me to be on this board, and I have yet to receive a briefing or acknowledgement of my request for that. I requested that we put together a special meeting with the Commissioner of Education to talk about the very important issues that we're facing in this Board of Ed, including high chronic absenteeism and suspension and funding related to the school system. I have yet to receive a response related to that. I also want to ditto the public's concerns regarding public meetings. It's long past the time for us to at least go hybrid. We sent the teachers back to school. We sent the students back to school. I don't know why we can't go back to schools. My last point is, I'll be making an official announcement of this, but I'm going to put together a 15 to 25 person superintendent search advisory committee to advise me as to what role I should be playing in this process. If anyone is interested in serving on that committee, please look up my email address on our website and let me know. I'll be putting out more details soon. Thank you for your time.
Madam President, that concludes all the raised hands.
Thank you, Dr. White and Dr. Joyner. We'll move on to the next item, which is the approval. Oh, Dr. Joyner, did you have a?
Madam Chair, I'd like to
comment?
request a point of personal privilege.
Okay.
Thank you. I've been really concerned about the rash of racism and anti-Semitism that I've seen in the country, and been around for a while. And it seems that over the last 4 to 6 years, it has gotten worse. I mean, we had so many horrible things to happen. And one of the reasons I'm concerned is because I believe in this country's ideals. We're based on the concept of e pluribus unum, out of the many, one. And we also make the claims that this is a country that's free for everybody, where we all have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. In the case of anti-Semitism, I have been a beneficiary of Jewish philanthropy from the time I entered school in North Carolina in the 1st grade, because the school I attended was funded by Julian Rosenwald, who was a Jewish philanthropist. And if you don't know who he is, he should be in the Hall of Fame of every Black museum, any organization that believed in the freedom of slaves and in the full citizenship of people African ancestry. He actually created thousands of schools in the South for people of African ancestry. And he worked hand in hand with Booker T. Washington to create many of those schools. History also suggests that Jews have been the long distance runners in the civil rights movement. If you know about Joyner, Cheney, and Goodman, you know that 2 out of the 3 are Jewish. James Cheney was an African American from Mississippi who was murdered along with Joyner and Goodman, and they were buried in a common grave until they were discovered by the FBI, who actually had to go down to Mississippi to solve that crime. Eli Sabin, who's on the board of alders for New Haven's grandfather, actually went to Mississippi and registered voters. If you're familiar with the movie Selma, and if you're familiar with the city of Selma, Alabama, who's also the home of the mother and father of Sandra's Soul Food, this is not a commercial, and Mama Mary's Kitchen, Mrs. Harris grew up in Selma, Alabama. When Dr. King got into real trouble, I guess I would say he got into good trouble. He issued a call to religious leaders. And one of the first persons to answer that call was Rabbi Abraham Heschel, who is one of my intellectual and spiritual heroes. And if you look at pictures of them walking arm in arm across the Pettus Bridge, you'll see Abraham Heschel arm in arm with Dr. King. In fact, Abraham Heschel said that few are guilty, but all are responsible. And that captures my sentiment that if we sit by and say nothing, when people make comments and get on podcasts and talk about how great Hitler was, then we're part of the problem. I don't care who they are. I don't care what they look like. It's wrong. One particular person has some serious mental problems, but that's still not an excuse for the people that follow him. And so I want to end by saying that anti-Semitism has no place in a country that has led the world in the fight against bigotry. And any freedom-loving person, any compassionate person should condemn it. And we should do everything we can to make sure that it does not visit our city. Thank you. I'm done.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Okay, we'll move on to the next item, the approval of the board meeting minutes for November 28th. Mr. Wilcox?
Yes, I move that we approve the board minutes of November 28th.
I second, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Any discussion? Mr. Goldson?
Thank you, Madam President. Just a few points on item 1, 2, 3, well, the second page, 190 through 190-22. I'm sorry, 190-22. Regarding this comment up there about 4 teachers' resignation, 2 retirements, and 3 new teacher hires. I went back to the blue and green sheets, and those numbers were not correct. There were actually 7 teacher resignations, 1 teacher and 1 administrator retirement, and 3 new teacher hires. So unless somebody wants to go back and recount again, those are the numbers I saw. So those numbers listed in the sheet are incorrect, in the minutes are incorrect. Further down the page, 192-22, where we talked about discussions, it says there was a question about whether there was a staffing issue. I made the question whether there was a staffing issue in the at the before and after school programs, and and the answer was in the affirmative. There was a staffing issue with paraprofessionals. They just weren't showing up because they weren't getting the extra pay. I just wanted that to be updated in the minutes superintendent's actual answer. And on page 3, on item 8, on the second to last sentence in the first paragraph, it says spear heard. I assume that's supposed to be spearhead. That's it for those minutes, except I still don't understand why we have 2 sets of minutes in our packages. I know that we were told one of them was supposed to be motions, but it says minutes, and all of the motions are in the minutes. So I don't understand why we're doing 2 sets of documents, one set that nobody's ever going to keep track of. I just think it's a waste of paper and a waste of time. And I said it a few meetings ago, and I'm saying it again. I don't understand it. I don't know why we're doing it, and it just doesn't make much sense to me. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Bolton. Mr. Wilcox?
Yes, thank you. I also have a comment related to the 2 things here that are labeled as the minutes. My suggestion would be, my understanding, as it's been said here, is that we need to have a list of the motions posted on the website within so many hours of the actual meeting, and that it can't wait until the board minutes are approved by the board. I just think my suggestion would be that they're clearly labeled, that these are the motions from the meeting, so that it's clear, so that, I mean, we have 2 documents labeled as the minutes. So if it was just clear, like right at the top, motions only from the meeting or something, that would allow us to meet the regulatory requirements while also creating less confusion. The second thing I have is, we've said in the past, and it's happened in the past, and it's not today though, is that all meeting minutes are watermarked as draft until the board has indeed approved them, and then they're posted without the watermark. So just, I would appreciate it if moving forward, if we could continue that practice. I'm sure it was just an oversight today, but if we could continue with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilcox. Dr. Joyner?
Okay, if what I hear is this, it's that we would label the motions in such a way that it's very clear that that's the only thing that paper represents. And that makes a lot of sense, because if anybody wanted to know what the motions were, we could distribute it. And as Mr. Wilcox indicated, we do have to do that fairly quickly. I think it's also a good suggestion to label anything as draft before we approve it. And I'm going to ask the recording secretary to do that going forward. And I'm also going to respectfully ask Mr. Golson to send his the items that he identified that were not accurate to the secretary for modification, for correction, if there are no problems with the board regarding that.
No. Alexiadis?
Madam President, can you hear me? Okay. Do you want me to address the Freedom of Information Act
Yes,
requirements
please.
on
Yep.
minutes and motions?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
Section 1-225 of the general statutes, that's part of the Freedom of Information Act, requires that a list of motions be reduced to writing, any motions that were made at the meeting be reduced to writing and made available for public inspection within 48 hours. So it does not necessarily require posting of the motions list, but that there's nothing wrong with that, and that's probably a better approach to post them. But that list of motions is intended to be incorporated in the minutes. So that motions list, in my view, does not. Well, there's no prohibition on circulating it or posting it. It doesn't need to be. Once the minutes are drafted, that list of motions does not need to be included in the board packet. I hope that answers the question. But that's why there's a separate list of motions versus the minutes. Minutes are due within, should be prepared and posted within 7 days of the meeting, but the motions list is the one that's within 48 hours.
Thank you, Attorney Alexiadis. Mr. Goldson?
Madam President, that's a little confusing. First off, if we're posting them within 48 hours, where are we posting them? Secondly, if they're not, we have many times come back to this board and seen errors in the motions or the votes taken by board members. So if they're not approved by the board, yeah, it could get confusing to folks posting motions that are not approved. So I would hope that I understand the reading of the statute. I would hope that we would get some sort of documentation from the Freedom of Information Commission as to whether or not we could post unapproved motions. Thank you.
Madam Chair. The
So,
motion,
one second, Dr. Joyner, Attorney Alexiadis?
Madam President, the Freedom of Information Act and the decisions under the Freedom of Information Act are pretty clear that motions lists and minutes, that the posting requirements do not require approval, for example, of the minutes, which is why it is important that they be marked draft. But you're not supposed to wait till they're approved. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Attorney Alexiadis. Dr. Joyner?
Madam Chair, the motions are approved. When we vote on motions and approve them, then that has been taken care of in the meeting. And it certainly makes sense to have those as a standalone document so that anyone wanting to know what business was transacted during the board meeting would know that X number of motions were approved and the vote that went with that. Hopefully we can get that straight and move on to the meeting.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Mr. Goldson?
Thank you, Madam President. I like Attorney Alexiadis's reply, and I'm good with that as long as they mark draft, because again, as we have, there has been many occasions where we have come back and had to change the wording of a motion or the results of the motion, the votes, based on errors or misunderstandings by the recorder. So to suggest that because we approve something means that whatever is put on the website is something that we approved is not the same thing. So I like the ideal of marking them as draft until we're okay with making sure that the documents are correct. Thank you, Madam President.
Okay, well, seeing no further discussion, we'll vote to approve the meeting minutes with corrections. Mr. Wilcox?
Yes.
Dr. Joyner?
Yes.
Dr. Benitez?
Yes.
Dr. Yarborough?
Yes.
Mr. Goldson?
Yes.
And the mayor's still not on. And I am a yes as well, so that item carries. Personnel report, Dr. Tracy?
Hold on. Okay. Thank you so much, Madam President. Good evening, board and members of the community. Happy holidays to everyone as we look forward to a brand new 2023. And as we enjoy our moments in our dash of time, let us continue to show compassion and love to one another. Having said that, on my personal report, I have today 8 new teachers that have been appointed and 6 new paraprofessionals. I just want to say that when we look at our vacancies, I have about 17 SPED vacancies and other vacancies. So we have some teachers coming in, and we're hoping that that trend will continue. We were looking forward to the December break, because some schools actually, some colleges actually have December graduations. I spoke with Dean Hegedus last week, and he described it with, we had Fran Rabinovich on in charge of CABS. We have other superintendents on. This was with Alliance Superintendents. And Dean Hegedus described the situation as bleak. Bleak. When he said bleak, there's not a lot of candidate pool for teachers. And I was flabbergasted when I saw 5 math teachers to be graduated. I said, 5? You know how we're looking for math teachers. So if it is that bleak at Southern, it must be bleak in other places too. So I just wanted to say that to us, that we are working frantically. Ms. Diggs and Lisa Flegler, they're working frantically to do recruitment, to get teachers, use all kinds of different platforms to see if we can get teachers in. So we were lucky to have 8 new teachers this week and 6 paras. There's a para shortage too. I need to say that. In this personal report, I want to highlight Matt Brown. For those of us who have been in New Haven, Matt served in New Haven at HSC, the teacher-run school HSC. He served there as lead for a good 5 years, and then accepted a promotion to a central office where he has been serving. Matt has done a lot of work in terms of designing and creating schools, designing and creating expeditional learning schools. He is a very dedicated, committed, intelligent, and awesome individual in my few moments I've had with Matt and interaction with him. Matt is coming back to us after serving as turnaround officer in Waterbury, and I look forward to welcoming Matt back to our family. Matt lives in New Haven, and his 3 kids also attend to New Haven Public Schools. I ask that you approve this personal report.
Thank you, Dr. Tracy. Is there a motion to approve the report? Mr. Goldson?
Madam President, that this board allow for the separation of the administrator appointments so that I could vote on that separately from the rest of the blue sheet. So I'm making a motion to separate out the appointment of the administrator, Matt Brown, for a separate vote.
Is there a second? Mr. Wilcox?
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. Wilcox, Mr. Goldson?
Yes.
You have your hands raised. Discussion?
Oh no, it was still raised from before.
Okay. So
Yeah.
any discussion?
I'll tell you why. I'm interested in voting this separately. Madam President, high school and community hasn't had a great graduation rate. Hasn't had a great disciplinary rate. Mr. Brown in his resume suggested that he had a 100% increase in 4-year graduations between the 3 years that he was at that school. The documents supplied to us by the administration have a different picture. I'm a little concerned by that. We're talking about sending him to a school that has high disciplinary issues as well as high chronic absenteeism. I'm not comfortable that he is the right person for the job at this point. No disrespect to Mr. Brown, but he was at high school in the community. He left us to go to an administrative job, and less than 2 years later, he's going back to us to go back to a building leader. that makes me feel a little uncomfortable. So at this juncture, I do not want to be able to vote positive on this, but I also want to be able to vote on the rest of the blue sheet in a positive way. So I'm asking this board to allow me to be able to vote yes on the rest of the blue sheet by separating this item out. Thank you.
So Colton, Dr. Joyner?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I don't think that's fair to Mr. Brown. And it's difficult for me to accept the fact that he would start out like this with someone questioning his character. Mr. Brown did work in establishing schools in Kenya. He established schools in Brooklyn. His whole life has been spent working with students that people typically don't want to work with. And I spent a lot of time at HSC when he was a principal there. And I think if you talk to the kids that were there with him, they were really sad to see him go. I don't know if we can blame someone from moving to a district to improve his or her standing. But I also think that it's laudable that he wants to come back to New Haven and serve in a very challenging environment. He really is a first-rate human being with impeccable intellectual skills, academic credentials, and ethics. And I believe that we actually struck gold when he decided to leave Waterbury and come back to New Haven. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Am I muted? No. Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Mr. Colton, was your hand up from the floor?
No, I re-raised it. Thank you, Madam
Okay.
President. I really didn't want to have this discussion. I don't know Mr. Brown well. I think I met him once or twice or three times. It's nothing personal against Mr. Brown, quite frankly. I just wanted to be able to vote in the negative on this appointment. I mean, I thought we would have already learned our lesson with these revolving administrators. I mean, we had one that we had here and who left us and sort of kind of in alerts, then came back, and that was gone again in the middle of the year. I thought we would have learned our lessons by now. I guess not. But quite frankly, I'm not really, that's not really the issue for me. We were provided a resume of Mr. Brown that said that he had 100% increase in four-year graduation. And then we're given a form in the same documentation of Next Generation Accountability Report that shows that that's not true. Now, either his numbers are wrong or the administration's numbers are wrong. But the fact is that that's uncomfortable for me to have a document that states something that is either not correct on his part or not correct on the administration's part. The school that he formerly was the turnaround leader on had a 16.5% suspension rate. I mean, in the first quarter. I mean, it's and if you look at the documentation that you provided to the commissioner a few months ago, the numbers that he claimed in terms of increase in chronic absenteeism doesn't exist either. So, I don't know, maybe he's not good in numbers or something. I don't know. But I know that the numbers that he has doesn't match up with the numbers that the administration gave to us. All I wanted to do was to be able to vote against this. I wasn't going to make an argument against his resume or about anything else. All I said to you folks was allow me to vote no. And I'm still asking you to do that. But the fact is, this is not to discredit him in any way. I'm just stating the facts. You all have a copy of his resume. You all have a copy of the next accountability document in your packages, and they don't match up. So I'm asking you again to allow me. I won't debate anymore on this. Asking you again to allow me to be able to vote no on this, while being able to vote yes to the rest of the blue sheet. Thank you.
Mr. Wilcox?
Madam President, since the motion, as I recall on the floor, is whether, the motion was to proceed with Mr. Brown's appointment. So I think I would really love it if we could grant Mr. Goldston's wish on the motion that he made, that we have the vote on this person. I look forward to voting for Mr. Brown. I recall when he left the district, we had many people sad he was leaving, saying we were losing a good one. I'm happy we're able to get one back. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilcox. Seeing no further discussion, we'll vote on whether or not we'll separate Mr. Brown from the personnel report. Mr. Wilcox?
Wasn't the motion to move forward with this?
The motion was to separate that item from the rest of the
Have
personnel
a separate
report.
vote.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, in my opinion, this is a backwards way to do it. The easiest way to do it would we just make a motion when you had the floor to pass the rest of the blue sheet minus that. Then we could have done that, and then somebody else could make the motion to do this. So if we have to vote whether or not to do,
I'm fine with that. I'm fine with whatever motion gets me the ability to be able to vote no on this appointment. I'm fine with that.
Madam President, I suggest the thing to do would be to withdraw the current motion.
Withdrawn.
Okay, so okay, thank you.
And somebody seconded it. Do they agree?
You did, Matt.
I did. I agree then. It was so long ago, I had forgotten. My mistake.
Exactly.
Madam President, I'd like to make a motion.
Remember, succinct. Yes, Mr. Wilcox.
Madam President, I move that we approve the appointment of Matthew Brown as listed on the blue sheet.
I second.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner.
Dr.
Any
Joyner.
discussion? Okay, seeing no further discussion, we'll vote to approve Mr. Brown. Mr. Wilcox,
Yes.
Dr. Benitez,
Yes.
Dr. Yarborough,
Yes.
Dr. Joyner,
Yes.
Mr. Goldson,
No.
and did the mayor ever make it back? No. 4 votes yes, so that item carries. Next item.
Matt has his hands raised.
Oh, I'm a yes as well. Sorry. So that item carries with 5 votes. Mr. Wilcox?
Yes, I'd like to make another motion, and that is I move we approve the remaining action items on the superintendent's personnel report.
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. Goldson?
Thank you, Madam President. Just one point. I think the superintendent said there was something like 6 or 7, or I can't remember how many appointments she said that was made for teachers, and I thought I saw 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
1, 2, 3.
Is there 5 appointments for teachers and then another 3 pending certification? So there's 8. Is that the number that the superintendent suggested?
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay, got it. Okay. I just want to make sure I was counting it correctly. Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no further discussion, we'll vote to approve the remaining action items on the personnel report. Dr. Yarborough,
Yes.
Mr. Goldson,
Yes.
Dr. Benitez,
Yes.
Mr. Wilcox,
Yes.
Dr. Joyner,
Yes.
and I am a yes as well. So that item passes.
Madam President,
Mhm.
allow me to bring in Mr. Brown, Dr. So you could say a few words, Mr. Brown. That's Dr. White.
Mr. Brown, please click the accept to be promoted to panelist.
Good evening, President Rivera, Board of Education members, Superintendent Dr. Tracy, executive team, NHBS staff, and members of the public. It's a great privilege to accept the role of principal of Wilbur Cross High School. I'm honored to return to New Haven Public Schools. As some may know, not only is New Haven my home, but my own 3 children are currently students at Cross. It's a school that we love, a school that we see the power and potential in, and a place that we also clearly see some of the challenges that remain. I'm deeply appreciative to Dr. Tracy and her team for trusting me with this opportunity and responsibility. For those on the board who support her and the students, staff, and parents at Cross who are part of the committee that believed in my candidacy. I am eager to get started. I do know from my many years as a school leader in Brooklyn, here in New Haven, and my current role in Waterbury, supervising principals, that this work, this calling of leading and collaborating to fulfill the promise of public schools in our own city, it's both vital and incredibly dynamic. I am ready to begin. I do want to give thanks to my wife, Rachel, and to my children who have been supportive of the possibility of this role and for their partnership in the excitement and the challenges to come. Needless to say, there was much discussion before I came on, and given that this is a public forum, I do feel compelled to say, both on my behalf, but also on behalf of the people who worked incredibly hard with me at HSC to do the things which I claim accurately on my resume that we did: reducing chronic absenteeism, increasing graduation rate, and having an incredible amount of turnaround, going from a level 5 turnaround school to a level 3 this year in the most recent Next Generation Accountability Indexes. I just want to make note that those things have been done. They've been done well, and I'm more than happy at a different venue to talk people, anyone who'd like, through both those accomplishments as well as the things we hope to do at Wilbur Cross once we get started. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Matt. Thank you, and welcome aboard.
Congratulations. Dr. Benitez?
I want to welcome back Mr. Brown. I do believe that having leadership who is committed to our city is important, and having a parent become a principal of one of our largest, or the largest high school, it is important. So I congratulate Mr. Brown on making the decision to return home. As many of our colleagues have done in the past, they go, they learn, and they come back to make things better in our city. So thank you. And I do have to say that when I was a part of the executive team, I did have to work with his team at HSC, and I saw a dynamic and very much stakeholder inclusive leader. And that's what I think Cross is used to. And I'm hoping that this is going to make the team at Cross able to continue their forward thinking about inclusive education at the high school level. So thank you, and congratulations to the Cross team.
Thank you, Dr. Benitez. Okay, seeing no further discussion. Discussion and possible action on the Board of Ed calendar. Mr. Wilcox?
I move we approve the proposed committee dates for 2023, 2024.
Is there a second? I'll second it. Attorney Alexiades? You're muted.
Madam President, consistent with Mr. Wilcox's motion, Mr. Wilcox moved to approve the committee dates, and that is indeed the title of the document, but it also includes the full board dates on that document. So I would just, to comply with the Freedom of Information Act, the list of dates it should be approved, but I think it should specify that it's board and committee dates is my suggestion.
Thank you, Attorney Alexiades. Mr. Wilcox?
Yes, thank you for that. I'd like to amend my motion, and that is that we approve the committee dates as well as the Board of Education meetings.
And I'll still second it. No, no seconds, huh?
No, I was going to second, but you beat me to it.
Oh, okay. I wasn't gonna second just because one of those dates is my birthday, but there was no second, so I had to jump in. Okay. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll vote to approve the Board of Education and the committee dates for next 2023 and 2024. Mr. Wilcox,
Yes.
Dr. Joyner,
Yes.
Mr. Goldson, Mr. Goldson.
Sorry. Yes, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Dr. Benitez,
Yes.
Dr. Yarborough,
Yes.
and I am a yes as well. And so that motion carries. Next item, Finance and Operations Committee, Mr. Wilcox.
Yes, thank you. If anybody would like anything separated out, please let me know.
Wilcox?
Mr. Goldson?
Thank you. I would like to separate number 1 on agreements, number 4 on agreements, number 9 on agreements, and number 5 on change orders.
All right, so that was number 1, 4, and 9 of agreements. And number
1, 4, and 9.
Okay. And then which
Agreements.
change order?
Number 5.
Number 5. All right. So I'm going to make a couple motions here. The first one is Mr. Goldson, I assume those can be moved together, separated out, but those 4 items moved together? Or do you?
Questions about them, so if we could, that's fine with me.
Okay. So first motion is I move that we approve agreement 1, 4, and 9 and purchase order number 5.
Second.
Second.
That was change order number 5.
Change order number 5, my mistake.
Second, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Any discussion, Mr. Goldson?
Thank you, Madam President. Agreement with Higher Heights. I know they do a great job. I've been hearing they do a great job, but I don't have any evidence that they've been doing a great job. They've been here for a long time. If we're going to keep renewing these items, we should have some evidence, as Dr. Joyner always says, we should have some evidence of the work that they've done previously for us. I've been hearing a lot of stories lately about the number of kids who are not applying for college has increased tremendously. And my understanding that the number of our kids, particularly African American kids who have applied for or been accepted by Promise has dropped dramatically. And I'm very concerned about the fact that we and this is not a hit on Higher Heights, but I think in the document that they have as part of their backup information, it says that there's only 1 counselor at Hill House. So I'm really concerned, super concerned by our lack of focus on making sure that our seniors are doing post high school, whether it's college or jobs or whatever. I don't see it happening at this point based on the information that I'm getting. I would have loved to have seen in this documentation the number of high school kids that they've worked with over the last several years. What school, how many of them have gone to school, how much money in FAFSA they've got. We don't have any of that evidence attached to this documentation. And for that reason, I would rather this went back to committee and got that information I know that's not going to happen, so I'm just going to register a vote against it. In terms with trifecta ecosystems, I looked at their documentation. They're talking about building a raised garden bed, or whatever they call it, raised garden thing, for $60,000, 1,100 square feet. That's something like $55 a square foot. You could buy I mean, the material, for instance, I looked at Home Depot today, and you could buy a 12-inch block of material that they're talking about using meta block for $2.28. So that comes way under the $60,000. So maybe I'm reading this wrong. I don't understand it. But it seems to me that we're being overcharged excessively on the building of this raised bed. So I am, again, I would have rather have gone back to committee and got some more information about it. But since I know that's not going to happen, I'm just going to register a vote against it. The agreement with Upon This Rock Ministries, I'm super concerned about that agreement. The documentation doesn't say who these kids are going to be, where they're coming from, how they're getting to the program, who's actually working with the children. It's not certified teachers, and what kind of background checks and protections are put in place to protect these children. We don't have any clue. We're having a problem getting our kids to school at this moment. I mean, we have like 60% of our schools have chronic absentee rates that are higher than 33%. And somehow we think we're going to get, I can't remember what it was, 25 or 60 or whatever the number was in the document, are going to go to this program on Grand Avenue after school is over. I just don't see how that's going to happen. And there's nothing in the documentation that shows that that's going to happen. Not saying where the kids are coming from. It's not saying how we're going to track it. And more than anything, it's not saying how we're going to protect these kids. Are these people who are working with them getting background checks? Who's giving the background checks? What kind of certifications do these people have? None of that information is in this documentation whatsoever. And everybody should be concerned about the lack of information in this documentation. I mean, we're talking about $35,000, $40,000, and we don't know who these kids are. So again, I would have loved for that to go back to committee so they could provide that information, but I know my odds were high against that, so I'm just going to vote against it. And the last item is the change orders. All of these change orders are 20%, which is amazing coincidence to me that somehow all of the change orders, except for number 5, are all equal 20%. Those are great odds. But this change order is 53%. And again, we should be forcing these contractors to give us the service that they bid for, not underbid everybody, come back and then ask for change orders to increase the contract. I'm concerned about all of these, but at this point, the one I'm most concerned about is the one that had a 53% rise in its price. And that's unfair to the taxpayers of this city. It is unfair to the other folks who bid on these contracts and bid fairly on these contracts. So for those reasons, I'm going to vote against these items. Thank you, Madam President.
Dr. Joyner?
Yes, I'd like to ask Dr. Tracy some questions that I think might clear some of this up. Dr. Tracy, do we do background checks on any vendor that works with our children? I can't.
You're muted, Dr. Tracy.
Dr. Jordan,
Mm-hmm.
anyone who works in our system has to have a background check. Part-time people, vendors, everybody, we do not, by law, we cannot allow people around our kids working with them without having gone through background checks.
Right. And Dr. Tracy, does any other, do vendors also have to have insurance policies?
Gemma is right there. Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So,
Gemma, we can't hear you. We can't hear you.
Yes, they all
All of
have
these
to
folks are
provide.
required to have, they go through this vetting process. They're
Mhm.
required to have insurance and everything to make sure kids are.
right.
And
And my last question. So it's yes on both. My last question is, do we also certify through a request for qualifications that they can do the work that they're bidding on?
Gemma?
Yes, we do. And in this particular case, we also certify that these programs and their employees, and this one in particular as well, is certified by the Office of Childhood, Early Childhood Education, and that the employees and the program goes through a DCF background check inspection as well.
So I guess this is my final question. So we actually touch all the bases regarding credentials, moral credibility, ethics, all those issues before we hire people to work with our children.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Mr. Wilcox?
Yes, thank you. I've heard a lot about wishes tonight, and my wish is that if anybody has questions related to any finance and operation items, that we receive those in a timely fashion. When we receive them, when the things are posted on the Friday before the meeting, if we receive questions before the meeting, the committee is committed, and I think we've proven that, we ask the questions. If we receive them after that, but in the week between the Finance and Operations Committee meeting and the meeting tonight, then we have time to work with staff to get the answers so people are comfortable with what they're voting on. So my request is that we receive the things in a timely fashion and not in the middle of a board meeting, particularly when I check meeting participant lists and I see individuals that attend the Finance and Operations Committee meeting. So I've attended the meeting, chaired the meeting. We had good conversation on these items. I'm very comfortable with them moving forward. The information backup is posted on the website and the meeting materials for the Finance and Operations Committee meeting. And again, my wish, my request is if we receive things ahead of time, we can get things answered. And if the goal is to get the answers to make sure things are happening correctly and then people are comfortable, then that's my suggestion as to how we move forward. If the goal is to make other points, then good job. I guess that's what we're accomplishing tonight. But I'm very happy with these things moving forward, and I look forward to voting on them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilcox. Mr. Golson?
Madam President, I thank you for that, Mr. Wilcox. I actually was intending to preface my comments and questions by apologizing for getting this information so late to this board. I've in the past I've tried to get them to the board sooner, but I had a really crazy week this week. I did attend the meeting, which is one of the reasons why the finance committee meeting, which is one of the reasons why I took a look at this again this morning when I had some time. And again, I'd like to apologize to the chair and to the board for getting these questions to you so late. But I got to tell you, particularly with the change order to 53%, and with this organization, with the lack of information, I mean, we don't even know who these students are. We don't know what ages they are. None of that is listed in the documentation. What schools they're coming from, nothing. I mean, we don't know what kind of, we don't know who's working with them. We don't know what kind of tutoring they're getting. The first documentation that we had actually said that they were going to be getting religious tutoring, and that was changed at the last finance committee meeting. So I get what the chair is saying, but I still feel uncomfortable with these, so I'm going to vote against them. Thank you very much.
Mr. Wilcox?
Just as a reminder, we have the information on how people can respond to the request for qualifications that the youth and family engagement folks put up to have our after school and before school programming is available on the website. I'm sure people there would be happy to answer questions as to how this happens. I think I'm pretty confident that we're not sending kids out in an after school program without checks and balances in place. And that's certainly the testimony I've heard in the past on this. But if this is a concern, one thing that I think that might be helpful is at our very next Finance and Operations Committee meeting, I will ask that office talks about the basics of how we have these after school and before school programs, how we get kids there to them, background safety checks, just the basic process of how that happens. I've asked them to do this in the past and they have. I'm sure that they can do it again so that then in that meeting we can have another overview of how that works so that we can have confidence. I've only been on the board for 3.5 years, but I am pretty confident that we're not sending kids off into our approved after school or before school programs without the proper checks and balances that are in place. So, but again, I've only been on here, like I said, 3.5 years. And so I could always use a reminder of how that works. So Ms. Joseph Lumpkin and others, that's one thing that I'll be in touch with you after this, just so that we can have a good rundown on it. And then just as a final thing, the information about the trifecta ecosystems, that seemed like a really interesting project. And I know we have reporters that listen to this, and that might be a great one to talk to people at the school about what their plans are with that and how it's installed, because it sounds like a pretty interesting project. Thank you.
Mr. Wilcox, Dr. Yarborough?
Yes, thank you. Three quick notes. One, in reference to college applications and higher heights. I agree that the data are important. One thing that was presented at our finance committee meeting is actually a little bit of data. It was abstract 1, which talks about the FAFSA challenge grant, and it gives the FAFSA completion rates for Wilbercross, Hill House, MBA, and New Haven Academy. And it talks about the goal that we have for FAFSA completion rate, which is an important step to college application process and acceptance and eventually going there. And the higher heights does not work with all those schools necessarily, but it does work with this particular document that we're talking about tonight is for Hill House, juniors and seniors. And we do have FAFSA completion goals to meet, and we do have graduation and more specifically college participation goals that we would like to meet. And if anything, we need an expansion of higher heights in terms of them working with our students, and then also other programs who can help our students and families with the college application process. So I do support higher heights being a part of that. And as well, to Mr. Golson's point, I also support data, us getting a report to say, okay, you know, how do we do what changed because students have had this additional support from the vendors that we contract. Secondly, in terms of the aquacultures, for someone who is a scientist and for someone who loves marine stuff in particular and aqua stuff, yes, sometimes there are options to build things, but cost and materials at a home improvement store does not equate to what it actually costs to build a high quality system. But as well, I asked about the price because I was looking at it and I said, you know, when you have this type of vendor and there's no comparison that we've been provided that we know of, it's hard to know whether or not we're paying at cost, whether or not we're paying a high amount or a lower amount. I do appreciate the service aspect. So this vendor is not just coming in and building these components for the school. But as the document outlines, the vendor is also coming back multiple times in order to maintain these systems. And I think an additional component that we don't always get, but when we do get it, it's a huge benefit. There's an opportunity for members of the school community to work with the vendor when they come back to service, to actually be hands-on with the vendor. And that might lead to the school and the students taking on some of that maintenance as they gain expertise in that. So I as well was looking at the price and cost of that, and I think it's worth us taking a try for it. And then the last thing I want to mention, Mr. Golson mentioned this, but just in terms of the change orders, I believe you were at the finance meeting, but that's also something that I brought up. You know, how is this happening? What's the timing of this? And what's the reason for this? Are these current needs? Are these projected needs? How are we doing this? Something that was commented that I thought was very interesting. Two things. One, we have a new system in place and a new process for hiring vendors and making these contracts. And as they're going back through past reports, one statement is that sometimes what goes out to bid, there's some discrepancy between what's been happening over the past couple of years in terms of what we approve as a board, and then what it actually costs to do the work. And part of what's happening now is looking at that discrepancy and shortening it so that there are fewer change orders, and that when something has a big change order, maybe it just needs to go out to bid, and we just not keep modifying that. So I appreciated hearing that information from the new company that is helping us to manage this process, so that we don't get in a place where either vendors come back and say, hey, we need to do a change order, or we keep adding things because we didn't appropriately assess up front what the district needs are. So based on that information that I received going through the finance meeting, I'm comfortable moving forward with these particular items and us voting on them as a group. That's all, President Rivera.
Thank you, Dr. Yarborough. Dr. Joyner?
Real quick, higher heights. One of the challenges, especially for first generation college applicants, is the FAFSA process. And if you don't get that right, then that affects your eligibility, financial aid, and so on and so forth. I spent 50 some years of my life with probably the best person ever in the history of New Haven in terms of getting kids ready for college. And the thing about the person that runs Higher Heights is that she was a counselor and administrator in school. She knows the city well. She knows the kids well, and she knows how to really help kids who are doing this for the first time along with their parents. On the other hand, you should also know that Mrs. Red Hannon has been working on a plan to make sure that we set standards for all of our vendors regarding some of the things that you guys raised in terms of the audience, the target audience, the impact of the program, how it adds to the bottom line. But she just got her job only a few months ago, but she was already on it. It had never been addressed before. And the last thing about change orders, Michael Gormany is a top-rate person, and I'm sure we have good people. I know we have Linda Hannons, and she's repeatedly said that she's not looked good in orange, so she's not going to let anything go by. But the city of New Haven has a change order policy and instructions that was revised March 10th, 2021. And it's very specific about change orders. Typically, a change order does not exceed 20% of the original bid. And if it does, the person has to write a detailed explanation. And there are 3 reasons that they could go beyond the 20%. One is necessitated by the emergency endangering life or property. 2, the change order will restore the contract to its original scope as bid, as additional funds have become available during the contract period. And then the contract is of a time and material nature, and additional work is required on the contract, usually dictated by budget constraints. So there are some very clear standards. What I believe we have to do going forward is to have greater communication and synergy between the city side and the school board side. And actually, I've given a number of members of the staff a book called Checklist Manifesto. We should actually have templates that outline every single step that will get us to where we need to go, as well as the guardrails that are involved in those steps and what the exceptions are. I have full confidence in Mr. Gormany and in Ms. Hannons, Mrs. Hannons, as well as our staff to make sure that we do all of that. But it's going to get even more robust as Mrs. Red Hannons really, she's been doing her job and her job, which is the job she had and the job she has. And it's been dispersed a bit. And so once we get that crew together, I'm certain that in the months to come, we will have a really clearly defined and better executed policy for procurement. It took me 3 years to get a procurement policy passed. And it only was passed when Yesenia Rivera and Mayor Elicker came on board. And I'm thankful for that. And if we follow it, we'll be fine. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Dr. Tracy?
Thank you, Madam President. I need to clarify something. I heard about a comment about Promise Scholarship. One has to know that Promise Scholarship, the decline is in the number of students who have certain grade point average to qualify for Promise Scholarship. So if you don't have the grade point average, you cannot qualify. So that's one obstacle there for our students. So yes, there's a decline in that part of it. There is also, I'm trying to get my eyes. And I also need to clarify that we have more than one guidance counselor at Hill House High School. But there's one guidance counselor working closely with Higher Heights to get certain things done. So all of our major high schools have more than one guidance counselor. And each guidance counselor in those schools take on whether it's 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, or 12th grade. So I just need to clarify those things. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tracy. Mr. Golson?
Thank you, Madam President. Well, that information should be clarified in the documentation that you're asking us to approve, because in this documentation, it says that there's 1.5 counselor at Hill House. That's what it says. That's why you're bringing on Higher Heights. That's why you're bringing up Higher Heights in the first place. Listen, I have all due respect for Higher Heights. I know several people on the board. I like the work that they're doing. I think that it's necessary. I just think that we need to have more information to back up what we're doing and why we're paying for it. And Dr. Joyner is always saying, if we're having these organizations do this work, they should be coming back to show us what they did previously. And we've had a whole lot of talk tonight about how we trust that person and respect that person and so on, but we still don't have the data to show it. And that's my concern. And you know, we have a this science thing. This is federal funding, and we're talking about paying something like $21,000 for a $2,000 fish tank. You know, now the materials might be another $500, but at the end of the day, I mean, what are we paying for? There's no breakdown there. I mean, if there's some other stuff that we're paying for, then show us what it is. But to put these big, I mean, the way you hide what you're doing is by putting big numbers out there and not breaking it down. And to suggest that we should be paying $60,000 for an $1,100 square foot bed, garden bed, doesn't do it for me. I don't trust anybody. I don't trust anybody except for me, because I don't look good in orange either. You know, so when I'm approving stuff that I feel comfortable that we're within the law, especially when we're talking about federal money. So I'm voting against it because I don't feel comfortable at this point. Thank you, Madam President.
Dr. Tracy?
Point of clarification again. This is a SIG grant that the school wrote for to the state, and the state approved that in their SIG grant application. This is not our ESSER funds. This is their school improvement grant that they wrote for Would they have those information and the state approve that? That's why we have it this afternoon on the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tracy. Dr. Yarborough.
Yes, Mr. Golson, and for those who are interested, towards the bottom of that document, it's actually a pretty detailed purchase list of what the costs are. And it's actually one of the more detailed ones that I've seen. It currently takes up 3 pages, going line by line of what they provide, what the services are, for how long. So I don't know if there's a different document you're looking at, but some of that information is there. And I do agree with what you're saying in terms of data. We need it in order to know how we're doing, where we can make improvements, and those things that are really having a positive impact on our students and families of the districts. We can leverage those even more. And those that are having less of an impact, they can either modify and improve, or we can make shifts. So I definitely hear your point and agree with the information piece. We need that. That's all,
Thank you, Dr.
President
Yarborough.
Rivera.
Thank you, Dr. Yarborough. Mr. Golson.
Thank you. I don't want to drag this out. Dr. Yarborough, that is the sheet that I'm looking at. That's where I got those numbers from, but it's not detailed enough. I mean, it says $60,000 for outdoor raised bed. Then it has a couple of little things mentioned in there about 3 visits and that, but it doesn't highlight what all those other costs is. Just has all of those items lumped in as $60,000. With the fish tank thing, 21.5. Again, it has the fish tank and a bunch of little stuff that goes in the fish tank. Again, it's 21.5. It doesn't have it broken down. I understand where you're coming from, and I don't see the need for any more discussion on my part on this. I've already made my position clear, but I just want to respond to Dr. Tracy and the SIG grant. My understanding is the SIG grant is a federal grant given to the state, which then gives it to the city. So this is federal money that we're talking about when we talk about SIG grants. It's not state money, it's federal money that's passed through the state to the school systems. Thank you, Madam President.
Okay, seeing no further discussions, we'll vote on F&O items 149, so agreements 149 and change order 5. Mr. Wilcox,
Yes.
Dr. Yarborough,
Yes.
Dr. Joyner,
Yes.
Mr. Goldson,
No.
Dr. Benitez.
Yes.
My elders still not on, and I am a yes as well, and so that motion carries. Mr. Wilcox?
All right, I'm going to separate out another item to move separately. And then once I make the motion, I request the floor back to provide the explanation for it. But I move that we approve agreement number 3 with Curriculum Associates once the sole source letter is received from the city of New Haven.
I second.
Dr. Yarborough, any discussion? Mr. Wilcox?
Thank you. So Curriculum Associates, as you can see in the action item, this is for Curriculum Associates to provide the professional development for iReady Classroom and iReady Mathematics. Curriculum Associates is the company that creates or puts out the iReady Classroom. So this is something that typically is approved as a sole source. I've received evidence that the staff has requested through the city a sole source letter on this item. My understanding is there's a backlog. They haven't received it yet. Typically, we would say, fine, let's wait till the next meeting, but our next meeting is not until January. And so we want to make sure that this, if the sole source letter is going to happen, that it can be taken care of. And based on this motion, if a sole source is not approved, then this is not approved and will have to come back to us. So thank you.
Okay, any discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote on agreement number 3. As long as we have the sole source letter, is that correct? Okay. Mr. Wilcox?
Yes.
Dr. Yarborough?
Yes.
Mr. Golton,
Yes.
Dr. Joyner,
Yes.
Dr. Benitez,
Yes.
Mayor Elicker,
Yes.
and I'm a yes as well, and so that item also carries.
All right. And I would like to move the remaining action items. Let's see here, let me check my math. I think that's the remaining 7 agreements, one abstract, 7 agreements, and 6 change orders. So that would be the remaining action items. I'd like to move those, that we approve those. Sorry.
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you, Dr. Yarborough. Mr. Golton, discussion?
Thank you, Madam President. You know, this really irks me because it's about attention to detail, and we are a school system. And if we can't spell the name of our schools correctly, then we have a real problem here. I mean, in the abstract, and this is not the first time this has happened, it has Hill House as 2 different words. You know, it's not, it's one word, one name. It's spelled here, capital HILL space, capital HOUSE. That is not the name of our school. So can we please, this is not the first time this has happened. I hope it's the last. Thank you, Madam President.
Okay, seeing no further discussion, we'll vote on the remaining F&O items. Dr. Joyner,
Yes.
Mr. Wilcox,
Yes.
Dr. Yarborough,
Yes.
Mr. Golton,
Yes.
Dr. Benitez,
Yes.
Mayor Elicker,
Yes.
I'm a yes as well, and so that motion carries. Let's see. Students report. Students are not in, but Mr. Cruz Bustamante sent an email just stating that the December citywide student council meeting will take place this Friday, December 16th at 9:45 a.m. at Hill House High School, which he spelled correctly, or at least I did when I transferred the notes. Thank you. I think that would be all. For that, teaching and learning, Dr. Joyner.
Madam Chair, I am pleased to offer the following as a report. Mrs. Red Hannons and I, along with the other assistant superintendents, have been talking a great deal about how we report data, student data, to the board. And I would love for board members to send me emails regarding any data that they'd like to see routinely. But what we have here is we're going to report attendance data, achievement data, conduct data, and the interventions that go with that, with various levels of achievement and attendance. We're working on that. And I have confidence that we will come up with something that the board will find easily to understand and use. The other point is that we've been talking a great deal tonight about the vendors that add value to desired student outcomes. It is absolutely desirable that any students, that any vendor that serves our students keep attendance records. They've been told that the kids are subject to the same rules and regulations while they're in their care as they are when they're in our care. I have 2 grandchildren in after-school programs, and I'm very happy with the support they're getting. If we visit the procurement policy, it does require that we evaluate programs and that we use the bid process where appropriate to ensure high quality. There are cases in which people are sole source. In the case just mentioned, the people that develop iReady are the best people to do all the associated work with it, and therefore are a sole source provider for their product. We are a policy-making body, and we want to, Dr. Benitez and I want to get certain series done by the end of February or no later than mid-March. That is very ambitious, but I think that with the support of staff and with the advisory support of other stakeholders, we can get it done. I'd rather set a deadline that really would energize us than to say, let's wait until the end of June. I'd like to give Dr. Tracy another good thing to talk about as her legacy. We're going to try to also look at the website to make sure that the aesthetics and the use of standards are there so that when people do go in and look at policy, they can navigate the system. And over the weekend, I had a conversation with Ms. Tiffany Jackson, who is also a golden acquisition. And I often talk to Keisha Red-Hannes and Viviana Connell over the weekend to deal with some of these issues. So we have a pretty good basic policy and instruction, but what we need to do is to tweak it, make sure it's up to the standards that we believe, and then how we present it and how easily it is navigated by people who want to go into it. Another really big deal is that we need a systematic approach to identify and program for students in every grade level who are in the not met and approaching categories on reading, writing, and mathematics. And the mayor has talked about the importance of reading, writing, and math. And we have the Smarter Balance Assessment that really is a broader overview of how well our kids are doing, but we also have classroom criteria and reference assessments, and they should be predictive of each other. If a kid is doing well in the classroom on the same instructional objective, they should do well when they have to take a high stakes Smarter Balance test. And it's not a norm reference test, it's a criterion reference test. And there's certainly nothing wrong with teaching the objectives in the classroom that the criterion reference at the state level measures. And we've been having discussions about catch-up academies that can provide extended learning opportunities with sufficient instruction and quality instruction and materials there for the kids. Some kids will need far more time than we have in a regular school day to learn those things that they haven't learned. And of course, the prime mover in all of this are families and responsive and respectful students. If we can get the families to be more supportive, to monitor their children's work and conduct in school, and if we can get kids to be more responsive and respectful, then we can move them. But some children will need more time. And that could be extended school day as well as mandatory summer school for kids that are in the not met category and in the approaching category to get them to achieve and exceeded expectations. And that's on every measure, their behavior, their reading, their mathematics, their writing. And we're gonna have to try to use rubrics across the district. And we are, by the way, doing that. But we have to make it systematic and make sure that everybody's doing it. It is really a challenge with the vacancies we have on our teaching staff. I was at Jackie Robinson on Friday or Thursday with Dr. Tracy. Was it Friday or Thursday?
Friday.
It was Friday, right? It was on Friday, and there were significant teachers not present. You can't blame the system for that. This is a national problem. And it's not just in education, it's in the health fields, and it is also in the service industry and municipal and state governments. The State Department has about a 75-person vacancy. That's our State Department of Education. And so we've got to figure out a way to get teachers, and it's a problem that requires more support from the state, but also from the federal government. I was around when they had National Defense student loans that encouraged people to go into teaching, and they would forgive 25% of the loan for every year you worked in a high poverty district. We're going to need those kinds of national policies if we're going to fix the teacher shortage problem, particularly for urban education. So Mayor Elica, hopefully you can hook up with the state and with our federal delegation and our state delegation to try to help them understand that this problem is not going to go away unless we create more incentives and rewards and support systems for people who want to be teachers. Thank you very much. That concludes my report. If anyone has any questions about T&L, you can email me directly. And if you have anything you'd like to add in terms of the kind of data we report to the board, please also email me directly, but know that it will be a majority board decision because no single board member can speak for or I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Questions or comments for Dr. Joyner? Okay. Facilities naming report, Dr. Joyner.
Okay, so I'm going to, at our January meeting, recommend an amendment to our naming policy. And I will send that to everybody. And the amendment will be to have the opportunity to name something after a person who's still living. And our naming policy covers new construction and whole buildings, but there are portions of buildings like gymnasiums, auditoriums, foyers, and what have you. And I'm going to bring that to the board for resolution, and I'll be happy one way or the other because as a board member, I'm obligated to follow the majority will of the board. But I will be sending it to you, and hopefully we can get that amendment passed. I will work very hard to do that because I think there are some very deserving people in this city who are alive, and they should get their flowers while they can smell them.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Mr. Wilcox and then Mr. Golton.
Yeah, my comment's just a request that it go to the governance committee first and then before it comes to the board.
It doesn't have to, according to our bylaws.
I just
but I certainly respect the chair of the governance committee. But an amendment to a policy can be made as long as it's on the agenda and as long as the majority of the board members vote for it. If it's not, but in the interest of collaboration, I will send it to the governance committee.
If I have the floor, that was my request that it go to the governance committee first, just so that it can be taken a look at there. And I think that's a good way to go forward with anything. While I understand we can do things differently than that, that's a pretty good practice unless there's some sort of emergency situation that would come into play. And examples of those were when we were doing COVID related things and things didn't go through the governance committee then. So that was my request. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilcox. Mr. Golton? And then
Mr. Wilcox made the comments that I was going to make, so thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Joyner?
Well, I'm a big Matt Wilcox fan, but I was only following the policy that regarding amendment, but I think in the interest of good relationships, and I have a very good relationship with Dr. Abby Benitez. I've had a great relationship here for her for years, so I will send it to her. And when we have the governance meeting, we can take it from there and bring it back to the board. Thank you, Mr. Wilcox.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Superintendent's report. Dr. Tracy.
Yes, I'm here. Thought I was sleeping a little bit. Not yet, though. Not yet.
Not yet, but I think we're close.
Yeah, we were up from Miss Hannons, myself, and Teddy Bar. We're up from 4 o'clock this morning, watching the snow, talking to each other at 4 o'clock this morning. Thank God we didn't have to do any closing. But so, in terms of my update, I just want to say that we have key staff members who are retiring. I will reveal all those names at the next meeting. We are going to have to work hard to replace some of these key staff members from food service all the way down. Key staff members, they have reached their time frame of working 30 odd years or more in New Haven and are ready to move on to other things. So I'll share those information with you. We're still working on finding someone to take on the transportation director position that Mr. Carl Jackson had prior to his illness. And we're working on that side, and there's some other key positions that we're working on filling. But today, the major part we want to focus on is the state accountability update. Last time when the SBA results came out, we shared the performance indicators. Today, we're looking at the holistic piece that the state puts together to consider and decide where a school falls in terms of categories or tiers, we call them, or categories, from focus school to turnaround to whatever they categorize those schools on, and the different aspects or elements that go into making those schools, in the categories they are. I must proudly say that HSC is no more a turnaround school. Hooray to HSC. I just want to acknowledge that, and I'm not stealing it under Ms. Hannons. I'm just so proud that I need to say that HSC is no more considered a turnaround school because of the increase in graduation rate at their school over the years. So that's one school. We have a couple of other schools that have 2 more schools to make it 4, I think, that we now have in turnaround. Some of them are close to exiting, but you know what happens in between the years of testing, and then the COVID hit, and then no testing, and then we're here where we are right now. So there are different elements on the reasons why some schools are where they are. But we're still fortunate that we have seen growth in our students, which is what we're focusing on, the growth we have seen in our students, in spite of the fact that we've had our challenges. So today also, I'm not sure if Dr. Baker is on. I was looking, I didn't see her. She
is here.
She's here? Okay, and after Ms. Hannon, she will present the climate survey. A board member asked for the climate survey. She will be sharing the climate survey with us that was done, so we get a sense to see the health of the district from the perspective of our students, teachers, and parents. So now I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Keisha Red Hannons.
Good evening, board. It's always a pleasure to come before you. Tonight, I will talk about the accountability index report. You received it in your board packets. I'll focus on the first, I think, about 8 slides for you. Overview of Connecticut's accountability system. It's built on 12 indicators, and it's really important. Dr. Tracy preferenced the growth rate. So you have, I'll start with the first, which is an overall academic achievement status. That's what we achieve in ELA, math, as well as in science. Science is administered in grades 5, 8, and 11, and ELA and math in grades 3 through 8, as well as grade 11. And then you have academic growth. And so we look at the growth that our students are making in ELA and math. And so those growth rates are measured off of grades 4 through 8, not grade 3, because that's the first year they take the test. And grade 11, it's only one time in high school. So your growth rate is focused on grades 4 to 8, as well as what is our progress towards proficiency in literacy and oral language for English proficiency. You'll also see participation rate, chronic absenteeism, preparation for post-secondary and college readiness. Really important, right? What percentage of our students are enrolled in college or career readiness courses? So those are your courses that are your AP courses, or your dual enrollment where they're enrolled in college, or it could be what work-based experiences are we giving students as well. And so preparation for secondary, now we're looking at what's the percentage of our students passing particular exams, the graduation rate, the on-track rate for 9th grade. How many of our students have earned 6 credits in 9th grade? That means they have achieved, they're on track to graduate in 4 years, right? And then our 4-year graduation rate, those that enter in 9th grade and graduate in 12th grade in 4 years. And then we also look at what's our grad rate for those that graduate in 6 years or less. Really important, right? Our post-secondary entrance rate. How many of our students are enrolling in 2-year or 4-year colleges? very important. Some will be shocked to know that physical fitness is a part of our accountability index score, but it's important and it's measured in grade.
Keisha, you may have to use your phone to support this. You're going in and out.
Oh, Lord, I was wondering if it was me again.
No, that's Keisha.
Ms.
Hannah?
Hands, do you want to stop sharing and I'll do the sharing? That might help.
What, did something happen?
Yeah,
Yes,
we're not getting your voice. You're going in and out.
Oh, okay, I'll stop sharing. You have it, Dr. White?
Yes.
Okay. So we could go to slide number 3.
I'm looking at it through the board packet. So
You're giving me, yeah, you can go all the way up to the beginning, past that. All right, right there. So can you widen it or no? And if not, that's fine. I know the board members have received it. So for our accountability report, which you'll notice for the first indicators, you see a decrease. That's the information that was presented to you over the summer. Those are our overall proficiency rates, right? Those are our performance levels for our students. Where you will see in indicators 2, you see all green, which means we've increased. This is really important because this is about student growth. Are our students meeting their growth targets for the year? The state sets individual growth targets for each student based upon the previous year's test score. And so how many of our students are achieving their growth targets? And you can see for growth, we had an increase of our students achieving their growth targets. For chronic absenteeism, we know that it decreased and we know we have a high focus on attendance. The amount of students taking college level courses are involved in work-based experience, which we call college and career readiness, remained about the same. And you saw an increase in our students passing exams for the college and career readiness scores. Are on track for high school graduation rates. You see a decrease there, but you see where for those students who are 4-year or 6-year, it's about the same. It's about the same as far as the overall graduation rate. And so our 10th grade, when you look at indicator 10, the amount decline in the amount of students that are entering into post-secondary schools. You also see a decrease in physical fitness, as well as our overall participation rate, and a decrease in the amount of students increase having arts access at the high school level. Our overall index score out of 100 points is 60.9. So that's what the accountability index, the last row, indicates what our overall accountability index is. And you'll see that it has fallen for about 4 points from the previous year that we were scored. And keep in mind, 18-19 is the last time that the state gave an accountability index score. Next slide, please. And although you see a decline for us, which you just noticed, you notice the state also declined. In our sister cities, you also will know a decline as well. However, we still remain with an accountability index score that's higher than our other urban centers as well. You'll notice that, and we've continued to maintain that as well. Next slide. Dr. Tracy mentioned turnaround schools for you. So every 3 years, turnaround schools are identified. And so this year for elementary and middle schools, the turnaround cutoff rate was 52.29, and for high schools, 49.63. And so we have 4 schools that are in turnaround status. That's Troop, Brennan Rogers, Clemente, and Wexler Grant. Troop and Wexler Grant were already in turnaround status, and Brennan Rogers and Clemente have now joined the group in turnaround as well. Next slide. We also have one focus school in New Haven, which is James Hill House High School. And it remains a focus school. It was a focus school previously, and it continues to remain a focus school for ELA and math. Next slide. And so our categories for schools, and this is really important, slide 7, you'll see what the cutoff numbers are on the accountability index, where schools fall within which range in category 1, category 2, category 3 as well. And then you will have some schools in category 4 and 5. I will note that on category 3 on this slide, I do notice a typo on it because we know that 52.99 in the elementary schools is what the cutoff was for elementary, and I believe 48 for high schools, 49.63. So where you see category 3, that shouldn't say 0 to 69.99, but it should say 52.29 for elementary to 69.99 and 49.63 to 69.99. Next slide. And this just gives a snapshot of the schools that of all of our schools and what category they're in. And I think it was noted already what schools are now turnaround. Although Brennan Rogers and Clemente are turnaround, you'll notice they're category 4 schools because they're new turnaround schools. And the category 5s remain in Troop and Wexler, and then HSC move out of turnaround to category 3. Thank you. And with that, I will end the presentation. Board, you've received the individual reports for every school, so you can look them over if you have any questions, as well as they're posted to the website for the public as well to see the individual scores for each school.
Thank you, Dr. Tracy and Ms. Redhannon's questions or comments. Dr. Benitez?
Good. Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Redhannon, if you could go back to the slide, or Dr. White, to the slide where the state accountability index is shown. I would like to comment on some of those items and to ask a few questions.
Okay.
Just give me
That
a
way.
moment.
Slide 3, Dr. Benitez.
The one where we have the actual performance and indication of continuance or improved or decline.
Yes. Yes, slide 3.
I want to notice to make sure that the public and every one of us notice that the last index is 1819, and we are looking at what was sent to us for 21-22.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to ask very few questions, but first I want to congratulate the teachers, number one, teachers and students in New Haven who have definitely worked hard at improving on what they've done in the past. And we, again, we're not supposed to talk about the pandemic. I'm the first one who says no pandemic, but look, after COVID, we still have students wanting to improve what they are doing in our schools. So I want to congratulate teachers and students for that hard work, and congratulate everyone who works to support them in their work. But I want to ask a little bit, I would like to know, when we look at the index, I know you mentioned that in ELA and math, we're looking at 3rd through 8 and then
No.
11. Is that correct?
4 through 8.
For overall
For
performance.
achievement, for achievement. Okay.
Grades 4 through 8.
And yeah, for 4th through 8. No,
That's for
3rd
no,
through
for-
8.
For
We start at
grade-
3rd.
We start at grades 3 through 8, as well as grade 11 for indicator 1. That's their overall.
Yeah, right.
profi-
That's my question. So
and- right.
that's what we have. Then let me ask, what do we use prior to 3rd grade to have an idea if our kids are on track for the 3rd grade mark?
So we have interim assessments that we use with our students to see if, and they're aligned to the Smarter Balance assessment. And then we also have assessments that we give within our benchmark assessments that we give to our students as well. However, there aren't many assessments that are giving us direct alignment, right? So we see our students improving on one measure, but may not be improving in another measure, which is why, if you can recall, about 5-6 years ago, the urban centers asked for the growth indicator to be included because we knew our students were making growth, even if overall efficiency levels were not at the level we wanted it to be. And so it's no surprise to us that we can see increases in growth because we know our students are learning and growing.
So,
Okay.
so and also, I must say that different assessment are given for different things. So they're not all apples and oranges. They're apples and oranges, not apples to apples. So, like for example, we give the DIBELS information, dynamic indicator of basic literary skills test, where we give the ORF, which is oral reading fluency, and those others. They cannot come close to the state one because the state one is about comprehension. While those are just basic literary skills. The one that we have been tracking over time that seem to have some close ties to the state test would be the RI, which we call the informal reading inventory, that has, because it's a comprehension test, that have some closeness to that. Within also the state information system, they gave us what is called interim assessment blocks that mirrors some of the types of items that's on the SBA test that teachers can use to practice to make sure their kids get acclimated to the types of question stems as is mirrored in the SBA. I don't know if that answers your question.
That's pretty good. I wanted to then ask, have we in any way noticed that there are gaps in what we're using in order to identify what are the gaps for kids as they are engaging in the SBA system, if you would, because I do understand that, we have the interim and all that, but do we find gaps and have you addressed that with the state in any way?
So I think, Dr. Benitez, I think one of the ways that we're addressing the gaps is we're changing curriculum, right? We just added last year, under Dr. Tracy's leadership, we added a new math curriculum, a new science curriculum. This year, we're seeking to add a new reading curriculum. So that's one of the gaps, right? And that's not a skills gap. That's for us, what materials we're putting in front of students for them to be able to acquire the skills necessary to not just perform well on a test, but to be better readers, right? Better mathematicians. The second piece is, as you know, in our schools, right? We're doing running records. We're constantly assessing their overall performance, but we're also in constant conversation with the state through best practices, through Alliance District symposiums, to hear more about best practices for students. And you know, the next slide really shows we're performing really on par with our counterparts in the sister cities. And so we're going to continue to keep plugging away, continue to find best practices that we believe will work with our students.
So
My
when we
last
do,
comment.
when we do, Dr. Benitez, when I think it was 2 years ago, Lynn and we did some clear analysis of the tests, and we noticed that a lot of our students fell down on, it's not that they cannot read words or what have you, but they fell down on application skills. You know, now I can read this, can I apply it? The critical thinking that you hear Dr. Joyner talks about a lot in this group, critical thinking skills. So, and given a problem, are you able to really decipher that problem rather than just computational skills as it relates to math, etc. So now we have Miss Monica Jones pushing the button about giving kids the opportunity to really struggle with, you know, rich problems that will demonstrate that they can have the stamina to stay with it, to get to a solution, rather than just, you know, those quick addition, subtraction, but how do I apply it to other situations? We also found out too in item analysis that there was a problem with command of language. When we say command, and it was right across from elementary all the way through high school, and when they do the SATs and stuff like that, command of language in terms of, do they understand and know how to apply their grammar skills, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we see gaps and we continue to work on these gaps, but these kinds of tests, they're not formative, they're summative. So it doesn't give us much information to say, teachers go back and do X, Y, Z. These are really summative. Now we've been teaching, now we've been working. Let's see how you bring your skills together and apply to a set of passages or to mathematical problems to solve.
Yeah, you've answered my question now, Dr. Tracy. I wanted to make sure that we have a set of formative tests and practices that are helping kids meet the needs when they have to engage in SBA testing. Now, my other thing I wanted to point out, which I thought it was great thinking about 18 to 19 and 2022, is the graduation rate. It seems that we're pretty stable, even though we have problems with attendance. So somehow our kids are having difficulty with attendance. However, that is not impacting our graduation rate yet. Let's keep our eyes and our actions very focused on the attendance so we don't affect that graduation rate index. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Benitez. Dr. Joyner and then Dr. Yarbrough.
Okay, I've worked very closely with Dr. Tracy and Ms. Redhand and Viviana Connor on some of these issues, and I'm going to direct my questions to Viviana and the rest of the gang, because she actually is in charge of the four schools, I believe. And Dr. Tracy scouted and hired her to do this work. So what I'd like for you to do, Ms. Connor, is talk to the board about the kinds of interventions that we're using for students in the lowest two quartiles. And I do believe, as Dr. Benitez said, that we know that Smarter Balance is a summative test, but we can give formative tests that are aligned with the summative tests, so we can be reasonably assured that when the kids get on the field of play, that they will have had sufficient practice and whatever. So I know we've had the conversations in TL about parent and student engagement, student behavior and effort, materials, time, quality of instruction, attendance, and student conduct. Could you talk about some of the things you're working with the principals to do in those schools to change that?
Yes, good evening. I'm going to try to be concise, although that's a broad question. For interventions, we are focused this year on small group instruction. So using the 7-week progressive monitoring, we continuously look at student performance and adjust what the focus of those small groups will be. This is provided through interventionists and or tutors, depending on the availability of staff. If those are not present, then the classroom teacher builds an innovative schedule in order to provide the whole group instruction, small group, and the intervention block as well. You talked about parent engagement, and that's a very broad sense of what we're doing. There's a lot of more detail and nuances to that when you look at the data. You talked about parent engagement. So those 4 schools are Title I schools, so they do have they take advantage of the funding for after school academic night opportunities to engage parents in whether it's a literacy night, a math night, or something a little more innovative to kind of re-engage them in opportunities to come back to school, especially in person, and enjoy a night with their students in an academic setting, but not make it homework, right? Be innovative about it. You mentioned the word discipline. So in these schools, we do continue to use the restorative approach in order to provide supports to students so they can reflect on bad behavior and reduce the amount of time outside of the classroom. When possible, there are times that we do have to follow the code of conduct, but for the most part, we try to reduce the amount of time outside of the classroom and have them be redirected as quick as possible to lower the loss of instruction. As far as attendance, I work very closely with Gemma and her team. Gemma and I have been BFFs for the last couple of months as far as looking at attendance, specifically at the Title I schools, because those numbers tend to be a little bit higher. And so we have redirected some focuses and some more staff towards these schools in order to help reduce attendance, rethink the strategy on attendance aside from home visits and phone calls, and trying to incentivize increasing attendance because all the things I just mentioned cannot work on an empty seat, right? So, Gemma and I have worked, our departments have worked very closely in trying to support them.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Yarborough,
Okay,
thank you,
so you're-
Dr. Joyner.
If there are no more questions with that, Madam.
Dr. Yarborough.
Yep, I have one question. Yeah, thank you. Just getting my notes. Thank you for the presentation and conversation. And I have one question, just going back to the district accountability report that Dr. Benitez referenced. And my question is specifically about 2B, item 2B. But as I looked, for the summative information for the district and also for the individual schools, I looked at where we are now, but I also tried to look back from the data we have here from 2015-16 and see what the trajectory was over the last couple of years. And then there's the pandemic break, and then here we are now with this information. And for 2B, which is ELA average percentage of growth target achieved for high needs students, there's just one pattern I see in the data from year to year where there's a pattern of higher, lower, lower. And my question is just what creates that pattern in our elementary and middle schools? Like, what is that we're seeing there?
So if I were to take a crack, so high need students could be considered to be students with free reduced lunch, or it could be students who are multilingual students or special needs students. Those are different groups of students that they track to see how well they're performing. I'm not sure if I get your question or I'm answering
You
your
started to, well, the percentage, yeah, yes, you start to. So for the district data information, like 2015-16 is 61.5%. Then it
Yeah.
goes down to 51.6, then back up to
Mhm.
56, and then down to 53.6. And it's back up again. Whereas some of the other line items, there's a trend in one direction or the other. So I'm just curious about what we're seeing with the pattern of up and down. Is
If you notice, these are all about the growth targets. Hold on, my computer shifted. Oh boy. Oh, I can see you now. I shifted away. It's about the growth targets. So those have a way of not being consistent because it depends on how many students are in that cluster and how many of them have shown growth. So it's not like a straight number all the time. Depends on the number of students in that category and the number that have shown growth. While you may see that not a level, field, it goes up and down each year.
okay, and
That's the best way for me to explain that.
yeah, and can students move out of the high needs designation? So okay, so they may improve and then perhaps the next year not any longer be in a high needs designation. Is that possible or no?
There is a possibility, but it's going to be a long time to get them out of that designation because it's hard to get students out of the designation of free reduced lunch, for example. So it's, unless something miraculous happened and we all get the level playing field of having not being faced with poverty or what have you. But in terms of special education, there is, and multilingual learners, there is a chance for them, but the growth may not be as fast as we expected, but there's a chance for students to come out of those categories based on their performance. There's always a chance. That's why it's a growth target. Yeah.
Thank you.
Did I answer your question?
Not quite.
That's why I said,
but you gave me
and I said, anyone else wants to take a shot at that?
Yeah, I'm not sure, my computer seems to be unsteady. So I had two responses. One, the special education. So I can be special education receive special education services 1 year. I then could be exited out of special education, and now I'm in the all students category. Just for example, so you can fluctuate there. The second one, you asked about the up and down trend. It's interesting. When I was principal, I noticed sometimes the data would go up and down from 1 year to the next. And one of the things you would note is they are different cohort of students. So those 8th grade students every year, they're exiting out of that 4 to 8 model. And you have a new set of students coming in 4th grade. So you have different students. I'm not sure why is it up, down, up, down. We probably would need to do a deeper dive, but I do want to just note to you that they are a different cohort of students that you're looking at.
Great.
And what is interesting, some of our schools, when they do a much deeper dive and track the students who started out with us in kindergarten, they see a different picture. Because remember, New Haven is a transient school system. Kids are in, kids are out, kids are in, kids are out. When those principals sit and really look at, these were the kids who started with me in kindergarten, and now here they are in 8th grade, you see a different picture in terms of progress that they have made. But that's not given by the state because they don't track them in that manner. Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you for your responses. You both helped clarify my question and give me additional context. So thank you. And that's all, President Rivera. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yarbrough. Dr. Joyner?
President Rivera, this is a very important question, and I'm glad that Dr. Yarbrough answered it. And the beauty of this question is that New Haven had set a precedent years ago when Hillhouse High School led the nation in high school game scores for 2 consecutive years. High scores in the nation among high school seniors in Title I. And we're going to give you a more detailed explanation when we put our heads together. But the cohort piece is really important. Just think about this. The K-4 students that we have right now will graduate in 2036. That's 14 years from now.
Jesus.
I will not be on the board, but I hope to be on the planet. Not in the planet, but on the planet. Now, those kids come into the district with unique psychometric characteristics. And if Pam Augustine was here, sometimes I get Pat and Patricia mixed up. If she were here, she would tell you what the kindergarten readiness scores are for the K-4 kids. Now I know you understand this, treatment effects. So the kids that stay with us for the entire 14 years get one treatment that is pretty consistent because they're in one system. The kids that come into that cohort, say in 3rd grade, we don't know where they come from, but since they're coming to an urban community, it is more, and going to a public school, it is more likely that they come from challenging personal circumstances. And we can actually know that, but it's more likely all over the country that they come from challenging personal circumstances. So that means that they have not had our treatment effects for the first 5 years. They're also poor and bilingual. And in some instances, they're not language proficient in their native language, or they're poor and dialectical. If you look at what happened in Oakland with Ebonics, that you have to make that transition from speaking English dialect to speaking formal English, which is a discourse of intellectual transactions. So the challenge our district faces is, one, how do we maintain the kids that stay with us for those number of years, that cohort? Let's call them Eagles. Mm. All right, so how do we maintain that? And then if some hawks and some doves and some other birds come in from other systems, how do we make them Eagles? So what we're going to do, we're going to sit down with Dr. Tracy, Keisha Red-Hannons, Viviana, and all the assistant superintendents, and Joseph Lunkin, and Dr. Benitez, and we're going to give you guys a user-friendly explanation for that. And we're going to try to look at it as following those cohorts of kids, because if they were only at 56 in this year, how do we get them above the average in the next year? And of course, the variables are time, quality of instruction, quality of materials, extended learning time, parental support, and student effort. That's why a few meetings ago, I gave you guys an active acronym. So we're going to give you a nice explanation. It's going to be colorful and maybe even animated, but we're trying to help these kids climb the mountaintop so that they can have the same abilities and dispositions as kids that come from more advantaged environments have. And this certainly is a great use of board time, but the good work has to be done in committee because it's very tedious and it takes a lot of time. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to the president's report. I sent an email earlier.
No,
Wait.
before that, no, sorry.
Go ahead. You have something else, Dr. Tracy? You have two things.
It's in your packet. I forgot to put it under my name, but it's part of updates. Dr. Baker, the item that say from insight to action in your packet. Dr. Baker works with our climate survey folks from Panorama and to try to get information from staff, students, etc., kind of checking the level of where we are in terms of our climate, get a feel of how people are perceiving the things that are happening within the schools and the district. So, Dr. Baker.
Yes.
Welcome, and I see you have Albert.
Yes.
Also
yes.
from Panorama.
Yes.
Okay.
So, oh, wow. Good evening, everyone. Boy, I have to go off of Dr. Tracy. I've been up early this morning as well, so I was here sipping coffee, so just bear with me a little bit. So anyway, Again, good evening, everyone, and thank you for inviting. When I got the message from Dr. Tracy that the board wanted to know more about the climate survey, I was excited. So I am Dr. Baker, and I'm the district climate and Title IX coordinator. So what I did when I got that invitation was I asked Dr. Tracy, could we have Panorama co-facilitate with me? Because I want to answer the questions in regards to what we're doing in a district. And then in this slide, Panorama will answer some of the questions and talk about some of the data based on the product itself. So I've been working with Panorama, I'm close to 2 years. So this is the second climate survey that I've partnered with Panorama with in regards to, like Dr. Tracy said, finding out how our students feel, how our parents feel, and how our teaching staff feel. So we'll go over the survey overview. I'll talk a little bit. And I've asked Mr. Albert Lee, who's a part of Panorama, to also share in the facilitation of the slides, and we'll jump back and forth. I know that you all have questions, and we definitely want to answer them. But we just ask that you just wait till we get to the question section of that, if you'd be so kind. We will try to get through this quickly because I do know, in the sake of time, it is getting rather late. So we will talk about the alignment to New Haven strategic plan. We're going to give you some key insights from the 21-22 survey data. And again, we'll sum it up with some questions. Next slide. Oh, I'm sorry. And let me please introduce my partner in Panorama, Mr. Albert Lee.
Thank you so much, Dr. Baker, Madam President, Dr. Tracy, Mayor Elliker, honorable members of the board, and honorable members of the New Haven school community. My name is Albert Lee. I'm an account director here at Panorama Education, and my role as account director is to support districts like New Haven with aligning their social emotional learning, school culture and climate data, and community voice data with your strategic plan, goals, and priorities. And so just a little bit of background about Panorama. Panorama is a company based in Boston with over 500 team members made up of former educators, research scientists, designers, and district and school administrators as well, all who come together with a common goal of helping districts gather feedback from their school communities and then taking action upon that feedback to improve student outcomes. We currently work with 12 state departments of education, over 1,500 districts across the country, including the New York City Department of Education, Boston Public Schools, District of Columbia Public Schools, as well as a number of your sister districts in Connecticut. And really, first and foremost, we are passionately committed. I myself am a former high school language arts teacher about impacting student outcomes. And so I'll just talk a little bit about the content of the surveys that we asked your students. So we administered a student, teacher, and staff, as well as family survey. And all of our content is nationally benchmarked for all different school types, district sizes, different district levels of free and reduced price lunch, and so forth. And it's been developed in conjunction with the Harvard and Johns Hopkins Graduate Schools of Education. And so we, in addition to administering these 3 sets of surveys, for this year, we have also included a professional development component where we will be supporting your district as well as your building leaders with setting goals and taking action upon the survey feedback to align to your safe school climate goals. And this was based on feedback that we heard from your educators from last year that Dr. Baker will go into in more detail. And so how does this align with New Haven's strategic plan? We know that in the current strategic plan, there were a number of priority areas that were identified around safe schools, social and emotional growth, equity, professional development, as well as youth and family engagement. And we actually designed the survey and selected the content and the topics to align with these specific priority areas. And so how did we actually design this survey? On the left-hand side of the slide, you'll look at how we actually created the content for the survey. And then on the right-hand side, we'll talk about some of the actions that we're taking in this current school year based on the feedback from last year's survey. And so in designing the content, we looked at existing frameworks like Safe School Climate Plans, as well as the New Haven Strategic Plan. We convened a cross-functional team of district leaders, union leaders, task force members, and other educators to identify what were the biggest areas of need from across the district. Dr. Baker worked very tirelessly to lead that work. And what we actually heard from your students, families, and staff in last year's survey is that there are really three main areas of focus. So how can we create more aligned experiences for students and their families? What does it look like to create a safe and supportive environment for all students and staff across the district? And how can we continue to develop and support our staff at New Haven Public Schools in this current challenging environment for school districts across the country? And so when we looked at these insights from this last survey, what we found was that there was educators had expressed a need for stronger coaching and professional development around taking action on this culture and climate data. And so for this academic year, we have included in our scope of work strategic advising for district leaders, data inquiry workshops where we actually walk building leaders through the culture and climate data and what it means for their individual buildings, as well as small group coaching with our team of expert advisors on how to set goals and create action plans around the data. In addition, we worked with the LGBTQ Youth Task Force to create some custom school safety and bullying content to measure how different groups of students experience safety and the prevalence of bullying and harassment within the district, which we'll be sharing more on in just a second. And for this year, what we plan to do is launch surveys during the month of March. There will be a training for building leaders and educators who will be helping to administer those surveys ahead of time, as there was in previous years. This will be embedded within the existing goal setting framework. And as we've done in the past, we will also be communicating key results and action steps publicly with the New Haven community. So many of you may be familiar with the school climate survey data summary that's posted on your website. And that's something that will continue for this upcoming year as well too, as well as access to the public results. Okay. And a little bit of context about why this data is important and how it relates to some of those key academic pillars and attendance pillars that were presented earlier. We know that social emotional learning and school climate indicators are directly related to chronic absenteeism, behavior incidences, as well as academic coursework. And so, while we're measuring culture and climate indicators, we're really tackling some of the core problems that you all are addressing as top priorities district-wide. Okay. And with that, I will turn it over back to Dr. Baker to discuss some key insights from last year's survey.
Okay, so this slide here really talks about how good we are doing in the district in regards to how our students feel. You'll see the first question here: how often do our students spend time at school with different races, ethnicities, and cultures? And they actually 77% favorable. So in this area, I wanted to start off some of the results with some positive things that are happening in our district from what our students are communicating to us. So we're doing a really good job in the students being diversified, working together, spending time with one another. So I really just wanted us to start there, because I mean, we do have some areas to work on. Next slide, please. Okay, so in this slide here, we talk about This is important because although some of our clients, it says here in the past year, how often have you been bullied or harassed in the following places? 92 favorably said that they haven't been harassed, but we have noticed that with the body type, when it comes down to some of our students being verbally harassed at school, that they did have some, we see here that there have been some harassment, and we wanted to take, really focus on that. I know it seems like it's a small amount, but we really want to talk about that because when, as you know, the law talks about any act that is uncomfortable for a student is a bullying act. So we want to pay attention to anything that students complain to us that they are being harassed or bullied. It seems like a small amount, but again, I put it on here to let them know that we are really paying attention to even the smallest groups that are stating that they've been bullied. Next. Albert.
Okay, thanks so much, Dr. Baker. So this slide actually references some of the new content that was added to the survey last year that was created by the LGBTQ+ task force. And so one of the new additions was asking students background questions around their gender identity. And so when asked those questions, we found that students who identify as non-binary, transgender, or genderqueer actually reported significantly lower levels of school safety as well as sense of belonging. And so what you're seeing on this slide is at the very top in the gray bar, those are the district-wide averages for those topics. And then the different colored boxes, I know it may be a little bit hard to see. I'm going to try to, expand my screen, but we're in slides 78 to 94 in your board decks if you have those printed out. The orange boxes actually indicate responses that were below the district-wide average. So if you look on the left-hand side in the row that says non-binary, and you go to the right under school safety, this orange box that I have this top arrow pointing out of, when non-binary students were asked perceptions of student physical and psychological safety at school, they responded 11% less favorably. So 73% favorable versus 84% favorable on school safety. And just another highlight, the box below that for sense of belonging, if you go down to the row that says transgender and go to the right for sense of belonging, you'll see that students who identify as transgender responded 8 percentage points less favorably than the district-wide average for sense of belonging. These are areas that we have identified as areas of improvement that are aligned to some of the professional development and coaching that we have included for this upcoming school year. And so, when we think about providing equitable supports for all students, it's important for us to just look at the data and objectively identify areas where there are certain groups of students who are falling behind other students within the district. And I'll turn it back to Dr. Baker to talk about sense of belonging.
Yes, so we really want to share this slide because in this slide, you'll see we're at 38% of our students feel are favorable, feeling like they belong to our schools, which is down 10% from the year before. And as you can see also here with the teachers, it's 58% and it's down from the year before, which is 65%. I thought that was a really good slide to show, to see that areas of where we really need to work on our school climate, what we're doing about it. And so next slide, Albert, because I really want to get into what we're going to do from here. So the plan, what we're doing is in January, which is next month, I've already proposed to Dr. Tracy to come up with, to increase our committee. Because what we need to do is talk about what we're asking from our students and what we're going to do about it. So we will be having a committee once Dr. Tracy approves that, and we'll go over the type of questions that we will be asking our students, our families, and our teachers. We will then, in February, after we've finished that Panorama will then be able to show us a prototype of the questions that
Because
we.
that should be done shortly, I think. I think.
Okay, so in February, we should, Panorama will finalize what the new questions will be for this survey coming up for 22-23. And then in March, as Albert stated earlier, we will plan to launch the climate surveys for the entire month of March. We've picked March because that is the month where there are no vacations, there's no days off. So then we will be able to maximize the engagement for parents, students, and the staff. And then in April, by April, Panorama will be able to share out the results with us. And then in May, once we receive those results in May, what we plan, Albert talked about a little bit, we will have now these sessions for school administrators to be able to receive the results and to learn how to utilize their results so that they can make some data-driven decisions. We want them to be able to understand that the climate survey is a useful tool. It can help them plan for the future plan for the next school year based on the data. What type of programming, what type of interventions will we need? How can we service our students? What do we see in which school there is a rise in this or there's a decline in that? And so Panorama in the upcoming contract will be able to sit down with a cluster of, we have 16 sessions, so they'll sit down with a cluster of the administrators for them to fully understand how they utilize the data and the results from the climate surveys. Then in June, all the results will be out. I will hope that the board will invite us back to talk about those results, because we normally do a meeting with Dr. Tracy and executive teams, and then it's posted on the website. Next slide, Albert, I think it's our last slide. Yes. Okay, so the next steps. After that we will align our goals that will be informed by stakeholders' voice and student outcome data, which is what we talked about. We'll outline what those indicators are and are used to measure progress towards those goals. We'll communicate and build buy-in for goals and scoreboard indicators with district and school leaders. That's where I was talking about, where we'll be planning on meeting with all the administrators, so that they can, I want the administrators, I can't stress this anymore. I want the administrators to understand that the climate survey is not anything to be afraid of. It is actually there to help them meet these goals and for us to find out, how do we build a positive climate that our district wants? How do we reduce bullying? How do we reduce any type of violence in our schools? So we will also align expectations for how the district and the school teams will mobilize around ongoing data. Again, I can't say it anymore besides layman terms. I want all the stakeholders in our district to understand that this important tool is useful. It's nothing for us to be afraid of. It's actually what we can use to make our district better and to enhance our climate plan. Next slide. I think that's it. Okay, so again, I know you all have 10,000 questions. I tried to speed through, so please let the questions begin.
Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Wilcox, and then Dr. Yarbrough, Dr. Joyner, and then Dr. Yarbrough.
Great. Thank you both for this presentation. It's very informative, very useful. I look forward to your plans coming together in terms of pulling together or widening the group of people to help with this, promoting the idea that this is not something to be afraid of, that this is useful information. Along those lines, I highly recommend reaching out to our student board members and to see what their suggestions would be, and how they can promote it through their student government groups. The second thing is, it would be great if in this next round, if there could be a deeper dive on the LGBTQ youth data and looking at it by school in terms of what schools do people feel more sense of belonging in, and which ones don't they? I'm wondering, like, for instance, is there a correlation with groups that have Gay Straight Alliance group there. And this is really important because, like the Trevor Project points out in their data, and they do an annual survey on LGBTQ youth that's nationwide survey. 45% of these students have seriously considered suicide in the last year. If they're a transgendered student, they don't just consider it, they also attempt it at a higher rate. And they also find in their data that youth who find their schools to be LGBTQ affirming have a less chance of attempting suicide. So and when we look at those numbers, even though that this is only a portion, it was between 3,000 or 4,000 of our close to 20,000 students. Those are still significant numbers of these youth. So I think it'd be great to continue this deep dive in. I really appreciate you all working with the LGBTQ Youth Plus Task Force in order to have some questions here that's yielding some really interesting data. So thank you for this, and thank you for the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Wilcox.
And I do agree that this should be presented every year when it's run and the data is looked at. I think that this is important data for the board to see every year. Thank you.
Dr. Baker, remove the share so we can see.
Yes, please. Yes,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Sorry.
Thank
Sorry.
you.
Sorry, thank you.
Dr. Joyner and then Dr. Yarborough.
I'll yield to Dr. Yarborough, and then I'll go after he finishes. If that's okay.
Go ahead, Dr. Yarborough.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your work, and thank you for coming to share with us and providing the information ahead of time so we can review it. I have two questions. The first question is, I wrote my questions down. How many students, so we have about 20,000 students in the district, but how many students do we have who are old enough to respond to the survey? I'm trying to kind of get my expectations for response rate.
Ooh, okay. So currently, I do not have that number, but currently the survey is from grades 6 through 12.
6 to 12. Okay.
Mhm.
All right. Thank you. And my 6th grade through 12th grade.
Correct.
Okay. Yes.
Correct. I'm sorry.
No, that's right. Okay. And my other question is,
Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Robert, hold on one second. Although Panorama does have the ability to provide us with the climate from grades 3 to 5.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Dr. Baker. I was just going to add that we do offer culture and climate topics for grades 3 through 5. However, some of the topics, particularly those around equity and inclusion, are for secondary grade levels only due to alignment with developmental reading level and so forth.
Perfect. Thank you. And my other question is, I was grateful to see maybe, I think, almost 4,000 people, students, staff, family members participate in this survey. I think it said last year I read on the website 5,500. My question is, what is the goal? What is our participation goal? And what is our participation cutoff for when we will close the survey and process the responses? And professionally, personally, I mean, I think we need to do 80% of the students, 80% of the staff at least. But what is our participation goal for ourselves for this upcoming cycle?
So in the past, we've had high participation rate, but timing is a factor because the state gives us a window of time to start SBA testing. And some schools would have started somewhere in March, March, April, I think about good 3 months, Keisha, right? For them to get time to do the testing so that we're not clogging up the computer system all at once. So I think the challenge that this poses is with the timing in the past, we didn't have to do SBA over so many months of trying to get the different grade levels in. But I think the Dr. Baker ran into that challenge last year too with the time it was given. So the response rates were much lower than we expected. We'd want to have 100% response rate because it's doable.
Okay.
What was the
Yes,
second one,
if
Dr.
there-
Robo? Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, you said a second question because
Well, I mean, that's it. It's around. So I agree with Mr. Wilcox that the data we have is very informative, and you were able to pull out insights that I don't know if the insights necessarily reflect trends, but it does reflect individual students or individual teachers, individual family members who completed the survey. I have one concern about the accuracy of our interventions, given the low response rate. And I'm very interested in how we can dramatically increase the response rate since we have 20,000 students in the district. But maybe if we just say, okay, how many 6th to 12th graders do we have, or 3rd to 12th grade, you know, depending on the survey we want, to really get an accurate picture of what our students would like to communicate. And then also what our teachers would like to communicate and their families. And I hear about the logistical challenge in terms of how we position this, given the other testing that needs to be done. You know, one wondering that I have is whether we need a window greater than a month for people to complete the survey, or we just don't close it until we meet a critical threshold that is statistically significant, not statistically significant in terms of, you know, the number of people who responded, you know, this is a significant result that we have, but in terms of the number of people in our district, we can confidently say that we have, you know, information that's telling us, helping us to see more clearly what we need to know. So that's kind of my concern, is just that we have an opportunity to really grow our response rate and hear from our students and our staff and our families.
Yes, thank you for that. Yes, that has been one of the key points of which I have been working on. So for example, for, let's see, 2019 to 20, our family was 16, we had 1,633. Last year for our family engagement, it was 950. So I'm thinking, you know what, we need to have an additional gatekeeper in regards to the surveys. So I've reached out to Gemma to say, you know, with the family resource centers being in some of the schools, then I would like for them to come on board to help promote the climate surveys, because they're trusted, you know, they trust the family resource workers because they're giving them all of the basic needs that they have. We've also negotiated with Panorama this year. Instead of having a large number of paper surveys go out, we're going to do QR codes. And we're hoping for 2 reasons for that. Number one, we'll save on the paper, but if families do not have any type of electronic device, then we're going to invite them into the schools to be able to do the surveys, and we'll try to get engagement that way. And it will also, if the families are in the school, then also teachers and whomever in the school can also talk to those families. So we are constantly thinking of other ways of how to ensure that we get maximum engagement. I believe Gemma had made it a suggestion that we embed the testing into, oh God, I can't remember this, I keep thinking block, but we embed the testing into time allotted in the school. So what I've done is this year, I'm working with the administrators right now to map out how you plan on doing this in March. Okay, who's going to be assigned, what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, what block of time is this age group, I mean, this grade's going to do it. And so they have been tasked with getting that information back to me so that on our timeline, when March 1st rolls around, There is no, we don't have the staff, we don't know how to do this. There is none. They will have that whole month with all the other trainings and testing that's going on. They would be able to have maximum engagement from March 1 to March 31. So that's what we're planning. So now I want to address the second part where you say, well, maybe we don't close it and we keep it open. The problem that we have with keeping it open, because we had to do this last year. Last year, our schedule was pushed off. We didn't get enough, so we extended another month. What the problem we have with that is when we extend it too far out, we need to allow Panorama the turnaround time. And if it's too far out, the results come back and then school is out. Okay, so the administrators don't have the time to review those and do some work now. And then we run into the summertime of, okay, well, am I going to be able to corral enough administrators to come now, sit down with us to go over the results? So we run into that. So we're trying to make sure that we have these results to these administrators before the end of school. That way, Panorama's right there. We can talk about stuff, we can strategize, and then the administrators can have the summertime to start planning and programming what type of interventions that they will need going into the school year and how they'll utilize this. So we've tried that, not saying anything is off the table because we want to maximize as much engagement as we can. So we welcome all type of ideas. So I hope I answered that, Dr. Gilbert.
You did. Thank you.
Okay.
And I appreciate your thoughtfulness and strategy going into this. Thank you.
Dr. Joyner?
Yes.
Dr. Joyner.
First of all, this is some of the most important work we can do.
Mhm.
And the reason I say that is it's a little bit like tilling the soil and fertilizing it so that stuff can grow. And in this case, by creating a pro-social climate in schools, you're going to improve academic achievement as well as student participation in co-curricular activities and what have you. One of the things that I'm interested in is, and Matt raised some of it, but I'm talking about my lived experience as well as people that I know, family members and what have you. In schools, children often discriminate against kids on the basis of gender and transgender, body type, visible poverty. And I know that well because I was visibly poor. And how long the bus is that they ride to school. Language differences, special education students, ethnic differences. There are all kinds of biases. It's not just about race, because within so-called races, because racism is not a reality other than one. Within certain groups, people discriminate against people on the basis of the streets they live on, parents they have, and I'm really revealing a lot about my own childhood and what have you. So this is really important. It is probably a foundation to what we do as a school district, because we get the relationships right, we can get the learning right and what have you. And one of the things that I'm concerned about is that, one, what are the classes of interventions that we use to increase belongingness? And my experience suggests that improving belongingness is a daily effort.
Mhm.
But you got to have a broad approach to it, which is basically be kind. And or the golden rule as the foundation of how you run your school. What you would find hateful if it's done to you, don't do it to anybody else for any reason. And I think a lot of the so-called sensitivity training is more race-based rather than based on the 5 levels of prejudice, which is anti-locution, which the N-word, I hate it. I just hate it. And because of my background and my age and where I come from, so anti-locution, avoidance, discrimination, physical harm, and genocide. And we have to do a better job of educating our families, because some kids find a better social climate in school than they do at home.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just keeping it real, particularly with certain types of characteristics. In fact, I've had to intervene in family situations to help parents understand this is your child. You're supposed to love your child. Well, he's this or he's that. It's still your child. And what have you. So I have a friend that was harassed when she was in middle school because she had long, beautiful hair, and she liked Menudo, and the kids liked Michael Jackson. And in her case, she could have liked both of them because she was a mixture of both ethnic groups, not races. But she got over it. But it was a hard life. And of course, I had personal experiences myself because of poverty, because of the shape of my nose, because I had a big head. All that kind of stuff is something that you have to get over. So this is important work, board. This is some of the most important work we can do. We don't have to wait for the survey because principals should be doing things. Teachers and administrators and families should be doing things all along. But what the survey does is helps us to zero in further, farther down, to drill farther down and what have you. And we need to connect it to even the lessons we teach. Read Convicted in the Womb by Carl Upchurch, and you'll get a good sense of how, if it weren't for schools, he wouldn't have lived as long as he did, because how he was treated by his mother and his grandparents. So this is some deep stuff, and I applaud you, Michelle, Dr. Baker, and Mr. Lee, for the work you're doing. We got to, as Dr. Yarborough said, do more of it. Yeah. We need to have incentives for schools to see which school can get the most surveys done. And we also need to let staff know that we're not using this data to beat you up. No more than a doctor uses an examination to condemn you. We give you this examination so you can get better. And so I'm hoping that the board would take this up and hear what Matt had to say about, we can't afford to lose one kid. We can't. I mean, so let's see if we can do something about this, and let's see if we can do more of it. And I really applaud you, Dr. Baker, and you, Mr. Lee, for the work that you do. And let's just do more of it. Let's get as much out as we can. And let's make this a kind district where every child believes, every adult believes that they count, and all lives matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Dr. Benitez?
Yes, good evening, Dr. Baker. Already some of my colleagues have mentioned some of what I wanted to mention or ask, but I do agree with the incentives for participation. As I remember as a principal, I wanted to shine when they told me, there'll be incentives for how many kids are involved, what the percentage of my teachers who participated and parents. And it was a great celebration for us when I was at FAME, which it wasn't called that when I was there. But one of the things that I'm going to suggest, and you might already have that in your plan, is finding exemplars of best practices for participation engagement, and sharing that with us when you come back. And also finding exemplars or schools that have done very well in using the data. Once they get the data, what do they do with it? Have they, have them share with you any change of practice that has brought a change in the school, so that we can celebrate with schools how this kind of data is really impacting what we want, which is change to improve our buildings for our kids. So if you could do a little bit of research on that and bring us back some information about that, I'll be very happy to hear how people are being creative in using the data they receive.
Will do, Dr. Benitez. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Dr. Benitez. Go ahead, Dr.
Thank
Tracy.
you, Dr. Baker and Mr. Lee. Thank you for coming on and sharing this information with the board. Thank you so much. Thanks to all of you who presented this evening. Ms. Hannans, thank you. And thank you, board, for listening to us.
Thank you.
And asking your questions and giving us your feedback. We do appreciate it.
Does that conclude your report now, Dr.
Yes,
Tracy?
yes,
Okay.
I am
Okay.
done.
Just making sure before I move on. So I sent an email earlier today regarding the next steps for the superintendent search. If you haven't already, I know Dr. Yarwood did because I saw his response, but if you haven't already, please take a look. There were some things to talk about as we move forward with the search, such as times to meet with the search firm. And I gave you a couple of dates and times. Another was the stakeholder groups and what we're thinking we want that to look like. So start thinking about that. Examples of job descriptions. I sent over some links, and thank you, Matt, for helping me put this together. And then finally, just salaries, what we're thinking about. The consultants, I'm sure they're going to assist us in determining compensation parameters, but I also sent you a link to an article that talks about the superintendent compensations in 2021. So just take a look, let me know what dates will work for you, and we can set up the meeting and kind of move forward from there. Mr. Goldson?
Make an assumption, and maybe I shouldn't, that our meeting with the search firm is going to be a public and open meeting. Is that
No,
correct?
that's part of the, no, that would be part of the personnel committee.
Why, oh, just a question, why would we not want that to be an open and transparent meeting? I mean, we're not talking about individual candidates, we're talking about a process that everybody in the city is interested in knowing about. So I'm wondering why we would want to keep that private or non-public.
It's not so much that we want to keep it private or non-public, it's just I thought it was part of the personnel search committee meetings, and we were told that we can do it that way until we get started, and they'll from there let us know how to move forward with everything else in terms of the stakeholder meetings and other committees, and then those would be public meetings is my guess.
I understand that we can do whatever we want to do, but that doesn't mean that we should do it. And I would implore this board, my fellow board members, to consider having as many meetings as possible as public meetings. I understand there's some that we won't be able to when it comes to dealing with early on with different people's resumes and applications and so on. But you know, we don't want to start this process off by hiding stuff. I mean, there's nothing to hide, right? I mean,
it's not, Mr. Golton, it's not about hiding. It's about, this is our first meeting with the firm, and this is pretty much to kind of talk about how we're going to set it up going forward. And so this meeting will be the personnel search committee meeting.
But why? Why would you want to keep that non-public? I don't understand the justification for it.
I've already said why. So moving on to the next question.
You said why. You said because you can, but you're not saying why. Why
I
do that?
said no, but because you have selective hearing. I said that this would be our first meeting with the search committee, with the search firm, and they're going to help us set up the rest of the meetings and the parameters for the rest of the search. And so more of those meetings, not all, would be public. But this meeting will be the search committee meeting, and it will not be public.
Well, I can tell you, I don't feel comfortable with participating in a private meeting with the search firm to discuss the process moving forward. I don't understand the justification for doing that. And we have said from the very beginning that we were going to be transparent in this process as much as possible.
And that is still the goal.
And there's nothing that could happen during that meeting that would endanger this process or endanger folks who are interested in participating in this process. And by keeping it open at the very beginning, we bring goodwill from the community to this process by being transparent and open. So again, I understand that you want to make that decision, but I think that that should be a decision made by this
It's not that
board.
it's not so much that I've made that decision, but as a body, we decided that we were going to be the search committee and that we would set it up first and then we would have our public meetings. And so that hasn't changed. And it's not about hiding and it's not about not including the community.
Madam President, I have the floor. That's not what we did. We did not, at no time did we say we were going to have a private meeting with the search firm and then open it to the public. We never said that. Now, if you want to say that now, and if the rest of the board agrees with you, then I'm only one of 7 members. But I don't hear any of the other board members chiming in on this and what their concerns are around this. And you're saying you're making a decision. We didn't make that decision as a body.
We did.
Mr. Wilcox and then Dr. Joyner. Yeah.
So, I don't think I appreciate that we're trying to set this up as a big fight right now.
No, not me.
Excuse me, I have the floor now. Thank you.
Okay.
So I think it's perfectly appropriate for this group to meet for an initial meeting with the search firm to talk about what this process will be. This body, we need to have a conversation. The community, various parts of the community, union representation has expressed their desire for this process to be widened. I think we need to be able to have a careful, candid conversation about how to widen it and in what way. I'm going to appreciate hearing from the search committee what their advice is from the hundreds of other searches that they've been participating in. I think I've only heard from all the board members that they want this process to go extremely well, extremely openly, in however it can be, so that we have a good choice made for this. And I know that based on the previous search, that I don't want to, I'm not going to take advice right now from people who were involved in the previous search.
Right.
I want to hear from the people that are involved in hundreds of other searches. So
Madam President, point of order,
Madam
President, point of order. That
Go
was
ahead, Mr. Goldberg.
that was an insult to myself, and I don't know if Dr. Joyner takes it as an insult.
I don't feel insulted.
But I take it as an
If the
insult.
shoe fits,
What? What was
you
that?
heard me.
No, I
Your
didn't.
point of order is not well taken, Mr. Goldson.
That's not what you said.
Please
You said
continue,
something else.
Mr. Wilcox.
Thank
Please
you.
continue, Mr.
So
Wilcox.
I think it's perfectly appropriate that we have the first meeting with this firm to discuss how this process can work forward, get their experience. And I find it frankly offensive to try to make it the insinuation that the rest of the board is in wanting to move forward without transparency, without wanting to make this work. What failed in the previous search was a divided board making a decision going against the community. Nobody, I'm hoping nobody on this board wants to repeat that. And the key is a divided community. And I think that trying to poison this process right now is not productive and does not go along with the things that we've said that we wanted to do.
Point of order. Point of order, Madam
Thank you.
President. Point of order,
Thank you,
Madam
Mr.
President.
Wilcox.
Point of order, Madam President.
What is it, Mr. Goldson?
To insinuate that my comments were trying to poison the process is unfair and defamatory. And I assume you're going to back that comment also, but I'm going to put it on the record that is insulting to even say that me suggesting to open the process is trying to poison the process. That is insulting, and I don't take that well. I don't take that well at all. And I don't think the community is going to take it as well either, Madam President.
Okay. Dr. Joyner and then Dr. Benitez.
Madam President, for the record, the board in the last search had several non-public meetings with the consultant firm. And they had those meetings, non-public meetings, so they can get the process right. Unfortunately, it's kind of easy to try to make something look transparent, and we're certainly are doing that, and we're not trying to hide anything. And the entire board, if from my recollections, agreed that we would set this up as a personnel committee. We will have all the meetings necessary to try to get the process up and running and in accordance with good practices and good relationships. And that after that, we would get a representative group of people as an advisory group and different stakeholder groups in the community to advise us on making the decision. The board has the final authority, and we don't want this process to be like the last process. The last process was unethical, it was corrupt, and we should never go down that road again. And I have evidence to back this up. And I'm not casting aspersion on anybody. I'm simply stating the facts.
So do I.
And excuse me, do I still have the floor, Madam Chair?
You do, Dr. Joyner.
All right, thank you. So not only that, but the process that we're using is the same process that good boards all over the United States of America use to first set up the process and then protect the integrity, protect the jobs of the people who apply so that nothing will be leaked out. Nobody will be able to do opposition research against candidates and what have you. And if that happens again, we should actually take strong measures against any board member found guilty of subverting the process. It's time for this stuff to stop. This community will not stand for a search like the last one. And by the way, it was a 4-3 vote when the charter says it has to be 5-2. But thankfully, we have people on the board now who don't believe in playing those kinds of games.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Dr. Benitez.
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. I know that this is going to sound like an attack to a fellow board member, but this fellow board member is constantly attacking us. And I feel that at this point, this person needs to stop attacking me or you or anyone individually or as a team, because he is part of this Board of Education. It is time for us to be united, because if this is how we are going to act during this process, we'll never get to hire a good candidate. This community is expecting us to do our job as a united team. And it is important that for this process, we respect each other and we stop accusing people of trying to do things when there's no evidence in their hands that people are trying to do any nebulous thing. So please, I'm asking, because I am seriously doubting that I can be part of something where there's a member who is constantly accusing me of being dishonest when I have made my life in New Haven an honest life. I am tired of being discredited publicly.
Thank you, Dr. Benitez. Mr. Goldson.
If you have evidence that a board member has been discrediting you in public, you should present that evidence instead of making nebulous accusations that don't have any evidence backing them. So here's the deal. I wasn't the president of the board in that last process, okay? I didn't lead this board in that last process. I wasn't in charge of this board during that last process. So for someone to suggest that I was the problem in that process is a little shaky, considering the fact that we did have a company that we all agreed on that the president at the time decided he wasn't comfortable with, and he changed to a different company that then became the problem. So if you guys are going to question, if I ask a question about transparency and opening the meeting, and that gets you people so excited and so uncomfortable, what's going to happen further down the process? If you start this process in the dark, people are going to see it as being done in the dark. And having a meeting with the company to talk about process
in public is a good policy. It is a good method. It is a good way to keep the community comfortable with this process. But if you start in the dark, everybody's going to see the rest of the process in the dark. So you all could blame me if you want to. I was one of 4 board members that made a decision that, you know, at the end of the day, didn't work out. We do that every day. We make decisions, and we don't have crystal balls. And sometimes they work out, sometimes they don't. But if we want to talk about unethical, I have the evidence about how this process was changed halfway through when they felt uncomfortable that their candidate wasn't becoming the front runner. So, you know, I talked about transparency, plain and simple. I talked about having a meeting in public. So if this gets you guys so excited this early in the process, Jesus, I'm afraid of what's really going to happen when we get down to the nitty gritty. So if you don't want to have the meeting in public, then fine. Vote not to have it or agree not to have it. But don't insult me because I brought the point up in the first place, because I said I support having it in public. If you don't want to have it in public, then fine. Right. If you don't want to have meetings in public, then fine. There's nothing I can do about that. I don't have the votes. But I'm going to continue to fight for this board to be transparent, to have its meetings in public, to have its meetings in front of the public, to include the stakeholders in the process. And if you're not happy with that, then fine, you're not happy with that. And you know what? You guys can launch another investigation against me if you want to. If you think that I'm insulting
Point of order, Madam Chair.
No. I'm responding to Abby Benitez send out. Abby Benitez said that a board member.
Mr. Golden, you're out of order.
No one is raising the issue of launching an investigation against anyone.
I am.
And as soon as I can get the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Thank you. Your point of order is
well taken. Point of order is not well taken. Thank you. Can I finish my points, please? I have the floor.
Finish your point.
Thank you. To suggest that a board member is making some sort of public comments, negative public comments, untrue public comments about another board member, then bring the receipts, bring the evidence. These accusations, people talk about me all day long. I don't come on this board meeting and say, oh, you're saying stuff about me in public and you're talking about me in private. I look for the evidence. I ask for emails, FOI emails to get the proof, okay? If you got proof, then bring it on. Otherwise, stop the nonsense. If you don't want to have a public meeting, then don't have a public meeting, but don't denigrate me because I asked for it. Thank you, Madam President.
Dr. Joyner.
Madam Chair, I move to adjourn the meeting.
Dr. Benitez.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to move to adjourn the meeting.
Oh. Did you not want it? Okay. Dr. Benitez?
Just wanted to clarify.
Second that motion.
I wanted to clarify.
I seconded that motion.
Hold on,
Point of order, Dr. Joyner made a motion.
No, I withdrew the motion because another board member was ahead of me. Thank you.
Go ahead, Dr. Benitez.
Just want to clarify for Mr. Golson. When you refer to the board, you refer to me because I'm part of this board. I hope you don't have anything to say about me personally, but as a board member, if you are talking about the board making dark things in the dark, like you say, you are referring to me. And I don't like that kind of expression because we need to meet with that firm, not to go do any dark thing. It's to do business and work hard and making sure that we do the right thing for this community, not to be in the dark, doing dark business. That's what I was saying. So when you refer to the board as dishonest, I feel that you refer to me because I feel part of this.
Point of order, Madam President. Point of order. I never said dishonest. I never called anybody dishonest. I didn't refer to anyone being dishonest. So if she has evidence that I called the board dishonest, please present that evidence. Madam President, or otherwise withdraw the statement.
Thank you, Dr. Benitez. Mayor Eliger?
I think Mr. Goldson's made his point that he feels the next the personnel search committee meeting should be public, and the point is noted for the record. I think that we're all trying to do the right thing here. We all have the same goal of identifying the best possible person for this job to lead our school district. We all come to the table with integrity and are trying to do what's best for the kids. We are following our Attorney Mooney's advice, who has helped countless boards through this process. HR and personnel search processes are typically done in a form of executive session. And that's to, in many ways, ensure that we get the best outcome here. So I think that, folks have made their point, and that's fine, and it's on the record, and lots of people have heard it. I'd suggest that we move on.
Thank you, Mayor Eliger. Dr. Joyner, your hand is still raised. Did you have?
Yes, Madam
Okay.
Chair,
Okay.
I move to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Okay. Mr. Wilcox,
Yes.
Dr. Joyner,
Yes.
Dr. Benitez. Dr. Benitez,
Yes.
Dr. Yarborough,
No.
Mr. Golson,
Yes.
are here, Mayor Eliger,
No.
I'm a yes as well. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. We'll pick up
Thank
the
you
rest
all.
of the reports at our next meeting.